All right, we're live.
Great. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's July 5th. Excuse July 5th, I wish. It's January. It's not July 5th when you go outside. It's January 5th, 2024. This is a special meeting of the Weston, Connecticut Board of Education. It's the second of a number of sessions we're going to have to review the school budget for fiscal year 24-25. We had one last evening where Superintendent Barberio and all the school principals and all the administrators gave an overview of the budget, and today we're going to go into that budget in detail. With that, Lisa, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are all here to answer any questions that you have. Hopefully you had some time to kind of think about our presentation last night. I know you have the budget books, and I guess I don't know how you want to do this, Mr. Aziz, if you want to start at the beginning and go in order of questions, or however you guys would like to handle it. We will attempt to answer your questions to the best of our ability, and if it requires additional information, then we will certainly come prepared to the next session with that information. So do we want to start at the beginning, or how would you like to start?
Well, I think it's up to the members. If there's, do we want to go around to each of us and ask individual questions? Do you or any of the principals or others want to go into greater detail? It's really how you'd like to present the balance of the budget in detail to the board.
Perhaps it would be helpful if we just touched with each board member for like 10-15 seconds to give us, like, I have questions about staffing or technology, like, so we can kind of sort it out and then we can go back. Would that be helpful? So we get a sense of where we have the questions. Like, if I may, in looking at the budget, for example, are there questions specifically about staffing and enrollment? Or if you want to tell us where your questions are. Why don't we start with you, Chad? What burning questions do you have? Or
Sure.
which topics, if you will, under which bucket?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. I don't have a bunch of big picture questions because a lot of the things, like, I don't see a bunch of room within like salaries or benefits, and that takes up a lion's share of what we're talking about. I certainly have carved out a niche for myself as the resident technology skeptic. So one of the line items I just want to make sure, and this has been very useful, the curriculum walkthrough that Tina and others have done about how we're using digital learning in the curriculum committee meeting has been very, very useful. But just one thing that I did want to check on as an example of the VR headsets in the,
Okay.
just finding out, is that essentially, well, that's the right word. Are they essential, and do they provide a value in terms of the bang for the buck of what we're spending and what they're going to actually deliver? So that'd be one small item. I will let the other board members take on the bigger tasks of, salary and benefits and things like that.
Okay. Peter, I'm just randomly picking people. Where do your questions fall, under what buckets?
I think I'll start with the slide 4 from last night, alignment to the district initiatives.
Okay.
I thought that was a good 9-point enunciation of sort of where we want to be. This is really June of 2025, right? We have current goals, but the budget sort of, there's latency, right? We're working on a budget that really starts September 24 to be somewhere June of 25.
Okay.
And my top down is I was sort of intrigued with the emphasis on ELA from K to 12, particularly the new reading initiatives.
Okay.
Secondarily, the use of SILs to drive that. Thirdly, sort of a reorientation of some interventions. I thought it was, I'm neutral on math versus English, but the first enunciation is to make good mathematicians, yet the reorientation of interventions is around ELA.
Okay.
Though I think as we learn as a board, it's really important to do critical thinking and speak well and think about and communicate well. So maybe ELA is good for all of us. And then I was going to drill down to some specifics. I particularly have an interest in the capital budget, of course, that's its own living document. And
Okay,
then twofold on the enunciation is the sustainability statement. I thought that was thoughtful and overdue and timely now. And
okay,
also, of course, the overall plan, working with the town of Weston. I have some input into that, of course. So that's where my questions sort of fell out on those sort of three issues.
okay, thank you. David?
So I have a couple of, I guess, high-level questions. Obviously, I haven't really had time to dive in to the book, but the first question I would have is relative to the surplus that we had from last year's budget. Where are we at trending this year for when this year's budget ends? Are we looking at a surplus or a shortfall? Then how does the surplus from last year, where we are trending this year, how does that inform us for the baseline budget for next year, being that we certainly had a surplus in the past? And then the third question is, we're adding programs, but what criteria do we use to evaluate programs that are existing to verify that we're getting our academic return on the investment? In other words, as we bring new programs into the district, what do we do to evaluate the existing programs to make sure they're being utilized? It shouldn't be sunset.
Specifically, if I can just probe a little there so we make sure we get the right trajectory in your question, David. Which programs are you talking about? If you can give me an example of a program.
Well, I don't have past programs. Like, I know we're adding more with composting. We're doing more in the STEM area, right? I think there were 3 or 4 programs that we are adding in the upcoming school year. I believe.
Oh, like the new course in STEM that's replacing the old course. That's
Yeah.
what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah. So being that these courses, like the VR piece, has a cost associated with it, which I'm a proponent of, right? VR is very much so in line with STEM 2024. We should be doing it.
Mhm.
Are there programs that we have done historically in the past that have either low enrollment, low interest,
Mhm.
or academically should be phased out? Even if they have a high level of enrollment, should they be phased out or looked at phased out, so that, as we add programs, we're being conscious of the cost to operate both the new programs and the historical programs?
Got it.
Lisa, if I may, I think we can just start maybe just answering questions as we go around. So David, to your question in terms of the surplus and how we're trending, I think over the past 2 years, we have seen some surplus, and we have made adjustments to all of our budgets going forward, just based on where those particular items have been. So in terms of how they're guiding us, we have continually make adjustments based on what we saw. Last year was a little bit different. And most of our surplus last year had to do with staff, and as we have seen over the past couple of years. In addition to that, we also have some credits that we did not anticipate. That's from last year. So again, we based on trends, we make adjustments to all of our budgets, which we have done. As it relates to this year, right now, and I think for the past meeting, we did show a slight surplus. I think we have outlined the reasons for that surplus. If I'm not mistaken, we're somewhere just under $300,000 in terms of our surplus. So we're not going to be seeing surpluses that we saw in the past 2 years or so. So I think what we've seen is relatively modest compared to previous years.
Okay, so just for clarification on my question. So the reason I ask it is because it should inform us as to what the base, I'm sorry, I don't know if I have a little bit of a cold or something. I don't know. So if I don't sound like me, I'll try and be clear. I'm trying to figure out as far as the baseline budget goes. So the baseline budget for last year, I think, was around $55 million.
57.
Right? I'm sorry?
57.
Okay. And so we spent about $1.3 million less than that.
Correct. But again, if you go back to the outline, I mean, I can send you the documents and, you know, just to add it to our documents in terms of reasons why we have those surpluses last year. And it's the reasons why we have those surpluses were not necessarily because we had staffing issues or we were overstaffed or anything else like that, or we were overfunded in particular areas. What we had last year were where we had positions that were not filled. And because those positions were not filled, we saw those surpluses. And then we had additional savings in other areas.
Okay.
So to answer your question further, we have adjusted. So if you're saying that our baseline last year was too high, I would not necessarily say that they were too high. I think there's specific reason that drove the surplus over the past 2 years. And I think what we'll do for this year, it will add those previous years' reasons for surpluses in our follow-up conversations.
Okay, and the basis of my question is the topic we bring up from time to time is the minimum budget requirement, right? And I always worry about whether or not we are on a trajectory that's not sustainable from a spending perspective. And if every year we budget more than we budgeted the previous year, then I was going to rephrase it. Every year we know that our budget starts minimum of last year's budget. So I always just worry that we as a community, a small community, are on an unsustainable trajectory. And so I just want to be really conscious of the minimum budget requirement, that when we start our budgets each year, we know that next year, the budget that we adopt this year is the starting point for our budget next year.
Thank you. Let's continue. We can elaborate on that a little bit more, but I want to give Sharon and Mike also a chance to weigh in on their topics or in their buckets. Sharon?
So a lot of my questions have already been covered by other board members, but I'm with Chad as far as the VR sets are concerned. I'm really interested in finding out, understanding, I guess I should say, the educational value of the VR sets and how you're going to incorporate that into the curriculum. So that was one thing. You know what, Lisa, you brought it up at the beginning, and I'm definitely interested. You know, we are experiencing an enrollment decline. Whether or not that's going to be continuing, who knows, based upon what we're seeing. However, I think that we still need to address it. And I was going through the numbers of staffing with enrollment decline, and I think we need to address that in this meeting. You know, it's tricky with minimum class sizes and maximum class sizes as to where we can cut, where we can't cut. But, you know, if we are seeing a decline, to David's point as well, our minimum budget requirement, we want to make sure that if we're declining in students, the growth has got to slow somewhat, right? It's just not sustainable. So that is definitely a major concern. And then I think that we would be completely tone deaf if we didn't understand that we need to be especially careful with the budget this year, primarily based upon the fact that we have this new mill rate that's going to be determined with everyone's, you know, property reassessments that came through. Everyone's very, very sensitive to budgets this year. So I think we really need to pay attention to that and be as efficient as possible. Phil, I would love to see and understand even more the information as to why we had an overage for the last couple of years. And some of them were relatively substantial. So it's important that we really do understand that, and that we have, not that I doubt that you haven't baked this in, but maybe we can all take a look at it, and fresh eyes can have some other ideas and thoughts too, as to maybe other areas where we can save or be careful not to over budget. And yeah, I think that's, you know, that's pretty much the majority. I have more minutia we can go into, but those are the main areas.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Michael.
Great, thanks. I guess, look, a lot of my questions too. So I haven't had time to go through the entire book. But from a high level, my overall questions are basically in the vein of, look, making sure that the district has what it needs in order to set ourselves up for success in the students. Also with an eye, of course, and this has been mentioned a couple times now, with respect to being fiscally prudent, right? So I'll belabor the point a little bit more. If I went to page 32 in the the book, I've seen sort of the variance between what the approved budgets have been and what the actual expenses have been over the last couple of years. And something changed back in 2018 because the variance has basically widened, right, over the last couple of years. And so the first 2 years of that, of course, the actual expense was greater. And then the last 4 years now or so, the expense, there's been a surplus, as I think, David mentioned. So interested in that. I know, Phil, you've answered, I guess, some of that, but again, want to bring it up and dive into it more. And I haven't had really a chance to pull it apart. But just something to be aware of. The variance has been, less than 1%, from 2017 back to 2010. And then all of a sudden it jumped afterwards. So really interested in understanding, has there been some change in
COVID.
Additional difficulty? But this was even before COVID, right? So 2018, fiscal year 2018, fiscal year 2019. Now maybe you say that COVID impacted the last couple of years in terms of not being able to obviously fill heads.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the case, and that's the basis for the surplus. Again, just want to make sure that we're on a sustainable trajectory.
Sure, we can touch on, we can touch on that. Mm-hmm.
So that's my first. David sort of touched on my other question, just a lot of programs, and that's great. Just in the vein of efficiency, what are the criteria or evaluation metrics that track their effectiveness? As you all know, I'm also focused on security. So it looks like we're assuming head count in 25, which is consistent with 24 and 23, if I read that correctly. Again, I went through this quickly last night. We all know there's been some recent turnover. And this body, of course, is also considering potential changes, which I think, Steve, I haven't seen it, Steve. I don't know if you've scheduled a special session. I know we talked about that before the break. Maybe we should get that on the calendar as well, just to make sure that we're covering our bases there in the next couple of weeks. So those are my three sort of overarching questions.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Did I miss anyone?
No, you only missed me, but.
Gosh, I'm sorry, Steve.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, gosh.
Most people do. Perfectly fine. No, I think the questions from all the members of the board are very comprehensive and will kind of touch on the budget, in a lot of different ways. But to Sharon and David's, earlier points, we do have declining enrollment. Now, obviously, we have new forms of the delivery of education. So, some of that offsets the decline in enrollment in terms of the cost of doing it. But I think we have a full menu of topics to discuss this morning. So however you'd like to start, Lisa.
Sure. Okay. I think that this is the order that I would propose. I think that it would be helpful to start with kind of our district initiatives and our goals with curriculum, specifically in curriculum and instruction, touch upon that with technology, the question about what new programs are there. There aren't very many. Go into then, we can look at the enrollment, talk more about specifically the finance piece, about the surplus, why it jumped, all of that. We have security as well that we can talk on. So if you're all comfortable with that, why don't we start with that? Because it's true, we have district initiatives for this year, but they are ongoing and they are multi-level. So I think that might be helpful to start with that. Mr. DeVito, can you put up the screen that talked about the district initiatives to refresh everyone's recollection? And Dr. Henkel, if you could kindly talk specifically about I would do the first three really relate specifically to, big expenses in reading and math, and then talking a little bit about STEM, addressing the issue of there was a change in Project Lead the Way, which was actually a reallocation, sort of how we determine these needs. I'm sure that Principal Kinetic speak a little bit about that with the STEM movement, and then go into the sense of belonging between staff, students, and families. Dr. Henkel, could you please start with that as far as the funding behind the math and the reading, because that's not going to go away at the end of this year. And speak also to, if you could please, the CILs and the intervention changes that we've looked at, reallocating them a little bit. For those of you that might be new, you know, when we got a lot of ESSER money for some of these interventionists. We don't have that money anymore. However, we knew that it was going to run out, and I think we were very planful and strategic about how to determine the best way to kind of phase it into the operating the budget, and then reanalyze and make sure the allocations are appropriate given the needs of our students. Dr. Henkel.
Sure. I'll start with reading, and I can start the conversation, and Laura and Patty are welcome to join in as well. Many of you are aware last year when I arrived, the state of Connecticut required all districts to review their current practice around literacy, programming, and curriculum and resources. We designed a district literacy team to evaluate our current program, our current curriculum resources, and how they did not meet the research-based review process that the state outlined. The state outlined a series of programs that districts were allowed to adopt. There were 6 of them that included assessments as well. So we went and we engaged in a very large group review in district throughout the whole year to identify which one of those programs we were going to adopt to update and revise our reading curriculum. That included assessments as well. So we adopted the American Reading Company program for our K-5. It actually is a K-12 program, to be completely open and honest. And so our plan was a 2 to 3 year adoption of slowly transitioning, starting in kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. So that's why you see that the plan last year was to adopt the reading program in K2. And we also adopted the evidence-based assessment tool that we needed to update and revise based on the state requirement, which was DIBELS 8 through Amplify. We did use DIBELS 8 assessments already in practice in Weston, but we needed to update the assessment to align to this the platform that is actually a digital platform, so it was a lot easier to implement. So this second year of implementation now expands that curriculum adoption into grades 3, 4, and 5. It also requires us to adopt the DIBELS assessment in grade 3. I did work with the state because the requirement was actually we were expected to adopt all 4 grades, K through 3 at one time. I pushed back and said, no, we're not going to do that. So they are aware that we decided to do a slower transition so that we can appropriately provide professional development to our teachers, that our curriculum and instruction leaders at the K2 and 3-5 level could also expand their understanding of the new program so that they could provide adequate ongoing support to our teachers when it came to planning lessons, planning, designing units, implementing small group instruction with students, understanding all the different aspects of the resources that came along with the program, and then also understanding how to assess the students during the fall, the winter, and the spring, which is also part of our practice normally, even before we changed our curriculum, but just making sure that we understood how to use the assessments, how to administer the assessments, and how to analyze the assessments. So that has been ongoing this year. This was our first year of implementation. We've had a lot of success so far, but moving forward into next year, we're going to expand that to 3, 4, and 5 so that we have a very strong continuum from K through 5.
Tina, if you would, you know, and it kind of speaks to David's question, like, why did we change? Okay, the state looked at us. Some people just went the waiver route. We didn't. Like,
Right.
What's the difference between the program we used to have, which was you know, Teachers College and a bunch of different things too. Why was this Science of Reading program so much more directed at the needs of the students? Can you just talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that
so
and why we're on that trajectory?
Sure. The expectation around the Science of Reading is that every day students get explicit systematic reading instruction. And so although we had some pieces of that aspect of the 6 pillars of reading instruction, we didn't have all of them. So as we were looking at all the different programs that were available to districts in the state, we recognized that some of the achievement data that we had for all students, there was an achievement gap in the area of special education. And so that was another aspect of the rationale between why we needed to review our current curriculum resources so that we had an alignment to all the different aspects of the 6 different pillars around the Science of Reading on a daily basis. So there was a review process which vetted all of the programs and the expectation of how they align to the Science of Reading. We did a full year review with our district literacy committee and a consultant from the CES, which is our Cooperative Educational Service Center. And we had a rubric that we evaluated all 6 of the programs internally based on how we believe good instruction looks like in reading, based on all those different programs. We believe in authentic text. We believe in a different variety of levels of text so that it meets the needs of all learners. We believe in different genres of text. And so this program that we adopted really aligned to our expectations around having a really robust library of classroom text and a variety of text levels as well. So we went through that process, and our curriculum instruction leaders also led some of that charge throughout the process internally at each of the schools at each grade level. And so from that rubric, we evaluated all of those 6 programs. We ranked all of them, and it was the district literacy team that really had an astounding. There was a definite divide between the resource we chose and all the other ones. So we feel that the quality of the program that we chose was meeting our needs and exceeded it in some cases.
And can you give us some examples? I'm just trying to touch on what the other board members had asked under that about. So we have these language arts CILs. We have them at the elementary schools, 1 in each building.
Yeah.
What do they do over the course of the day? Or perhaps Laura and Patty want to elaborate on that. And then what does the 612 SIL do for the secondary level? Like what does a day in the life look like? Laura, do you want to expand on that? What does Andrea Noble do?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. So the curriculum instructional leaders and the instructional coaches spend the vast majority of their day supporting our teachers. They're in the classroom. So while the reading program, we may get some training from the consultants with the program, what that implementation looks like on a daily basis is supported by our coaches in the moment, every day in the classroom, supporting students and teachers so that they can see it in action, they can answer teachers' questions, and they can help make sure that the program is implemented in the best way possible so we can maximize student growth.
Yeah, and just to be more specific as well, they model lessons, they co-plan with the grade level teams, both in small groups, but also individually, because we know that every classroom makeup of the students is different. So they customize their planning with the individual teachers based on their need. They analyze data, both at the school level, but also at the classroom level and at the individual student level. They model small groups. They review and make sure that all the resources in every single classroom are adequate, and make sure that the teachers have what they need to execute those units and those lessons on a daily basis. They also consult and I shouldn't say supervise, but they facilitate and support our interventionists in the buildings as well when it comes to reading and or math intervention support and programs as well. They don't service individual groups of students because our interventionists do that. As Laura mentioned, our curriculum instruction leaders work directly with the adults in the building, but they do kind of oversee and be good thought partners when it comes to intervention support when the interventionists are working individually with students in small groups.
And one thing I think is important when we talk about intervention, I know Peter was talking about like what are the, the whole idea of the interventionists, and if you notice in the budget, we've tweaked. I think it's important to know that even over the course of this year, we tweaked people's schedules based on the need of the students in front of us. And I see Patty shaking her head. If there was a need, for example, at Weston Middle School for someone to cover something as an interventionist, and the need wasn't as great at Weston Intermediate School, we tweak those schedules then. These people have fluid schedules, if you will, where for several months, they may be focusing on one thing. And then if there is an emergent need and we can do it, and I really appreciate the principals' way that they have worked that, to be able to make sure that the needs of the students are addressed right in time, not waiting till next year. There was an example of that. I see Laura shaking her head. We had reallocated just this year involving reading intervention and special ed based on some needs of that we had in the lower grades. Can either Tracy or Laura elaborate on that so the board kind of understands how these interventionists work and how we've tried to accommodate kids' needs?
Yeah, I can start and Laura can chime in. We're constantly assessing, as you said, the needs of our students in both general education interventions and special education support. And honestly, there was a need for some increased support in the area of special education, which you'll see reflected in the proposed budget, that we were able to make some shifts during the school year to provide supports that best meet the needs of the students and tap into the skill set of the professionals who are working in our buildings. That's really what it's all about. And I think, again, your point about the flexibility of the building administrators and also the staff members in those roles is critical. We have a lot of really talented people with specific training that is needed in different ways at different times for different students, and we're able to respond to that need in the moment.
I know at the secondary level also we did, I want to give them a chance to talk about what do the language arts still do, the 612 still do in the middle school and the high school, and also talk a little bit about, if you can, about the interventions, because I know, Dan, we flexed something in your building to make sure that the needs were being met.
Yeah, can you hear me?
And Megan, yeah.
Yeah, in a similar way, the full-time SILs especially work on a daily basis in the classrooms with the teachers, coaching, monitoring student performance, looking at student performance data with the teachers, coaching them on instructional strategies, just really helping us move our building-wide goals and objectives forward in a meaningful way. Did you want me to talk about the interventions at this time too, or? Okay, so the interventions also, we've had quite a bit of movement even since the beginning of the school year with some shifts. We've needed to, sometimes we have special education teachers teaching reading intervention classes to special education students. Sometimes we have our reading interventionist teaching special education students, in addition to our SRBI, regular education intervention for the students who are struggling in both reading and math, I should say. So we have had we've had some movement internally. We've had some movement across the buildings as well, reallocating staff to make sure that we're meeting the needs. And that's why you will see some changes in our proposed budget this year with a reallocation of the 0.5 of our math intervention being reallocated to reading, because that is truly where we're seeing the need at the middle school. So that's why we have a proposal for the 1.0 math intervention specialist and a 1.5 reading intervention for next year. And again, those interventionists work directly with students, whereas the curriculum instructional leaders are working directly with the teachers.
Megan?
Hi, sure. The English CIL at the high school is pushing into classrooms all of the time. She's really instrumental in supporting our teachers in really further developing a lot of initiatives. Poetry Out Loud was a wonderful ninth grade program that we had this year that we had very few kids participate in last year, and we had all of our ninth graders participate in this year. And so those programs really are assisted by her coordination. In addition, we have a film fest that she continues to help, which was extraordinary. I mean, the participation of our ninth graders through our 12th graders. I said it yesterday in our faculty meeting, I could not get over the level of participation of our ninth graders who contributed daily in front of their senior peers. It was pretty extraordinary. And really that would not happen without not only the support of our teachers, but really of the CIL helping to coordinate and support that endeavor. She's also really instrumental in assuring alignment to the standards, and we're always evaluating that and making sure that our curriculum is aligned, and then also aligning our assessment practices. So meeting with our curricular partners, which are our teachers that teach alike courses, and they have prescribed times in the day to meet. And she's often pushing into those curricular partner meetings to assure that we have common assessments and that we're progressing along in an aligned way.
And if I could just jump back in for a minute, because a key role of the curriculum instructional leaders, especially in math and in reading, is that articulation within the district. So the same CIL who's at the high school is the secondary CIL for math and for reading. And Jess DeBuono works with the teachers in 6th grade, particularly to make sure that there's a nice smooth transition from 5th grade to 6th grade. In fact, in the coming weeks, they'll be going down and spending some time just with the 6th grade ELA teachers at the intermediate school. In a similar way, she works with our 8th grade students in the writing portfolio to make sure that their writing skills are up to par and helps with the transition to high school. So I don't want to underplay the importance of those CILs in terms of the alignment within the district and making sure that there's smooth transitions at both ends here at the middle school.
I'll just add to one of our goal areas in terms of our priorities for accreditation in the following spring is really focused on intervention and that multi-tiered system of support. And both Jess and Riley participate in our SAT meetings, evaluating our screening data from the NWEA. We're looking at how our interventions support students, which students need interventions, where. Dan mentioned some of the support programs at the middle school. We have a writing center that teachers are assigned to support students, and Jess also supports that. We also have a math lab that teachers are assigned to support students throughout the day. That's another one of our goals in terms of intervention processes. And Riley supports the teachers in that math lab as well.
Yeah.
They're very busy, I guess is right. They're very busy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could spend all day talking about all the different aspects of how they are the Velcro between curriculum, instruction, assessment, intervention, and one piece that maybe we didn't elaborate yet on is their connection to professional learning and professional development. We use them during all formats of opportunities to be with teachers, whether it be during the full day professional development that the district provides, whether it be during curriculum partner time when they have grade level team time to work together, whether it be at faculty meetings or meetings before school. So they really are seen as people that we are investing time and energy in, also to be at the forefront of educational research and best practice, and use them to come back to help build the capacity of our teachers on the ground, because they're the ones in the classroom. And so we really use our curriculum instruction leaders to help be the Velcro between educational research and best practice in the classroom. So I know Dan and Megan and Laura really touched on some of the work with curriculum. They oversee within their respective departments the Summer Curriculum Academy teams over the summer, as well as any curriculum design that occurs throughout the school year, whether it be at faculty meetings or department meetings. And then, as we keep mentioning, they really help us with some of the connection between what the assessment data is telling us and how that transfers and translates into practice on a regular basis. So that's kind of a high level conversation around some of those big aspects that they've really been rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty with. And then one other aspect that we mentioned, and I just want to also elevate some of that work, is the multi-tiered system of support, which is now the new phrase that you may have heard from scientific research-based intervention, right? The state now changed the acronym to be multi-tiered system of support, because we want to include not only the academic aspect of support, but also the social emotional learning aspect of support. And so our team at the district and the school level is really working on updating our curriculum and our interventions and our screening assessments, and how all those pieces come together when it comes to supporting students and the whole child from kindergarten all the way to high school. So
where do you see the trajectory of math going, Tina?
Yeah,
that's a district initiative.
Yeah.
You know, play it out for the next few years. It's not just this year.
Yeah. So last year we had a visiting team, very similar to NEASC, but it's called Tri-State. For those that might be new to the board, we had a visiting committee come in and look at our curriculum and our math trajectory from grades 5 through 12. The reason we chose 5 through 12 and not K through 12 in full transparency was because we were simultaneously reviewing literacy with a group of literacy representatives in the district. And we couldn't keep using the same people. We're a small district. We wanted to be mindful of the continuity of instruction and the number of time that we were pulling people out of the classroom when necessary. So we really looked at 5th through 12, focusing on some of the review and the reflection from that team. One of the aspects that came out of the report and the feedback from the Tri-State Visiting Committee was that our curriculum resources needed to be updated and reviewed. The last time that we looked at the resources that we have in our district was over 10 years ago. And the current resource curriculum that we have on Ed Reports and on some of the other tools that the district and the state uses to review curriculum resources was outdated. So we are in the process of looking at what student-centered mathematics looks like and how our current resources align to that. We're in the process, thank goodness, last year we already had adopted, or the previous curriculum instruction leader before I arrived had already started doing some of this work in the middle grades. And that's when we adopted illustrative math in grade 6. So we are expanding that out over the next 2 years and beyond to write our curriculum in grade 7, 8, and also Algebra 1. So you'll see that is a new request moving into next school year for mathematics, so that we now have curriculum alignment and resources for grades 6 on up. If you come to our curriculum committee meeting, our subcommittee meeting next week, you'll see that we are also looking to expand backwards, and we are piloting in grades 5 a few different math resources to consider for adopting next year as well. But we are strategically thinking about how to implement new curriculum in grades K through 5 in mathematics, because we know we're doing literacy and math simultaneously, and we don't want to overwhelm teachers when it comes to learning new resources and curriculum. So we want to strategically think about how to best support them at the lower grades. Because as many of you know, elementary teachers teach all content areas. They're not specialized until we get to grade 5 and up. 5th grade, we're very fortunate. 5th grade is a dyad model, so we do separate the content areas. And so half the teachers, I don't know, Patty, if you want to talk about it, but half the teachers teach the STEM areas and half the teachers teach the humanities area. So that helps when it comes to professional development and supporting teachers with planning and implementing. So there was a question that came in from Mike Guido. Mike, do you want to chime in and ask the question? I'm sorry, I can't read the whole thing.
Oh, sure. I just had a quick, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Just a quick question about, given the robust discussion around the curriculum.
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to review that and the changes to it, and where would that be?
So right now, we have an intranet platform that the teachers have access to, and that's where our curriculum is housed for them to access. the Summer Curriculum Academy, which is another request for this school year, coming in the summer, is to work on more synthesized units of study that we can make public so that parents have access to more developed parent guides. That's also underway, kind of like a snapshot, right? By grade level and by content area. Those have not been developed yet. So that's in the process of revision in that Summer Curriculum Academy as well. There are all of the platforms like the American Reading Company and Illustrative Math. We do have resources directly from those companies that the teachers send out to parents. So prior to the unit being implemented, there's like a quick snapshot for the upcoming unit and the standards that are being taught and some strategies that parents and students can work on at home. And so that's how we've been leveraging some of those resources, but they're not Weston owned per se. They're more from the company, and the teachers have been distributing those either via email or on their websites. And that's where we are able to access some of those parent or school to home partnership information pieces.
Great. And that synthesis, is there a target date? And I may have missed it in your explanation. Is there a target for when that will be completed and available?
It's not by one grade level or by one content area. It's being scaffolded as the curriculum is developed.
Okay.
So hopefully this summer, K2 will have some parent guides in reading. And then also 6th grade math will have some parent guide also. First, we need to develop the curriculum before we then can synthesize and share out what on the public side to parents. So it's kind of like phase 1 and then phase 2. Everyone's in different spots. I know it sounds, it's a scaffolded approach.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. So basically in mathematics, you can hear that when I talk about a scaffolded approach, same thing is true with mathematics. We've focused a lot this year on 6th grade, because 6th grade was the first year that we adopted the new core resource, and we're kind of working our way outwards. So next year we'll have a really strong trajectory and continue in grades 6 through high school. And then we're going to be working our way backwards from 5th grade down. And we used a lot of the feedback from our Tri-State report to talk about, what does good student-centered mathematics instruction look like? We've been focusing a lot on professional development with our teachers. You may have heard last year we did some building thinking classrooms, professional development with some of the research that Peter Liljedahl talks about. And I know Lisa mentioned it about in one of her previous Board of Ed presentations, where we're looking at getting kids out of their seats and working on around the perimeter and working in small groups where they're standing and working on whiteboards and visibly showing their thinking and defronting the room, so the teacher becomes more of a facilitator versus any teacher directed instruction, a shift in how that looks.
Can you talk a little bit about science, Tina? And
So
maybe talk a little bit about what we didn't include.
Yeah, so great. And that was my plan as well. So science also in last year in the Summer Curriculum Academy, we are very fortunate. We hired a curriculum instruction leader who has a wealth of experience in the next generation science standards and around three-dimensional design when it comes to curriculum development. Last year, we started focusing on the 6 through 12 trajectory when it came to curriculum revision. The state of Connecticut has adopted and provided open source curriculum resources in the area of science. And we really have only focused our curriculum revision in certain content areas and courses, I should say, for the revision. So biology, chemistry, and physics have done a lot of work this summer to revise curriculum. 8th grade science also has worked on updating their units. But we have a long way to go around curriculum revision to ensure a K-12 alignment. And so this year, we hope that with some of the support from the Summer Curriculum Academy, we can expand on that design and look at more units of study that need to be revised in science. But currently, as Lisa mentioned, our curriculum instruction leader in science is not full-time. The only positions that we have full-time right now for supporting curriculum, implementation, assessment, and professional learning is in math and literacy. Our K-5 curriculum instruction leaders do support math and science, but when it comes to the secondary level, the curriculum instruction leader is only a half-time position. Ideally, it would be great if that curriculum instruction leader was full-time, because she is not able to currently provide enough support to all of the teachers in the middle and the high school because she teaches classes for half of her day. And so that would definitely be a support, something that we didn't ask for, but would definitely be something that would be a need and something that would help support the curriculum process, especially since science is a tested grade as well with the state. And we have a lot of additional aspects of assessment that we really haven't engaged in yet because our curriculum is not fully developed and revised based on the next generation science standards. And the articulation from kindergarten through 12th grade needs to have a larger emphasis because we haven't completed that yet.
Yeah, and to be perfectly frank, we struggled with whether we put it in or not this upcoming year. And we, this new model of full-time is still relatively new. It's entering year 2. And as much as I think that it is warranted, we kind of put it on pause because we also have a fiduciary responsibility. Is this something that we want to really continue to focus our efforts on math, language, arts? Because there's a lot of work that has to be done there, and then move into that because there are some things that we have to do. There's going to be a mandated by the state computer science. We do have a computer science program. We're doing work in technology. And to David's point about, these new programs and how do we decide, especially with Project Lead the Way that we started at the middle school, there are some things that we kind of have to wrap our arms around with a little bit more and with the structures. So, we anticipate putting it in, frankly, the following year, as much as it would be helpful to have it for next year. Megan, can you talk a little bit about under the science, the new program? Like, why did we decide to go with a new course for our Project Lead the Way? And, that is a new course, not a new program, and how we reallocated and how that decision was made, to their point of how do we make these decisions?
Sure. The teachers in Project Lead the Way approached me last year, actually. So we've been really thoughtful about this. So when I started and currently in our program was computer integrated manufacturing, which students and teachers refer to as CIM, C-I-M. And they approached me to talk about replacing that with digital electronics. And we did a lot of thinking on it. And I asked, for a little time because I was new last year and just getting to know the school and the program and the courses. And we continue to have conversations. Erin Lucia also surveyed students, which I think is really vital in the process when you're determining, student interests, where kids see themselves down the line in terms of their engineering goals and future careers. And we really came to the conclusion that digital electronics is the more contemporary class for our students to take. The CIM course really gives students experience in the CNC machine, which really leads students to more of a vocational role in a mechanical type of career, machinist type of career. The digital electronics is more real world applicable. It helps students to understand like this is not my field, by the way, I was a social studies teacher, transistors, complex electronic systems, some of the real world examples, because that was really helpful for me to understand, like deli counter systems, toll gates, copiers, home alarm systems, and kind of the inner workings of that. And also teaches them the Arduino programming language, which is that electronics. Some of you might know that better than I do, that electronics programming language. And the content aligns more closely with some of the topics that are taught also. So it's a good addition to our POE classes. Principles of engineering classes and other programming classes at the high school. So we really determined that digital electronics was the most appropriate class. In addition, many high schools in the area are no longer teaching CIM as well, realizing what we've realized as well. The other piece of the puzzle is that our CNC machine is outdated, and those machines are incredibly expensive to upkeep. And when they get outdated, we are talking about around a $30,000 replacement cost to continue to keep that course going as well. But again, that was not the driver. The driver was student interest and really looking at future careers and that trajectory over time, and whether we were helping students towards like more of a machinist vocational career, or we really wanted them to understand like the inner workings of electronics and that, again, that programming language.
And it's true, just for people that might not be as familiar with the high school courses, on page 88, you can notice that we offer every other year on some of the courses, correct, Megan? Like, we're not offering civil engineering, and that's because we're a small school and we're trying to be responsible with how we spend our FTE.
Sorry, we have announcements going on right now, but we have, I hope you can hear me. We have, what we do is we alternate years too. So when we look at like civil engineering and architecture, we might offer that one year, but not the other. So we're really trying to maximize access to students by being really responsible in terms of our class sizes and really our efficiency in terms of what students have access to in our overall program.
And the course for that new program or that new course, not the FTE, but the material cost is in your budget, correct, Tina?
Yes, 14,680. It's in 73, object code 7300. I don't know what page that is.
14,000. Are there reoccurring costs in the future because of the nature of it, or is there an upfront cost to part of those materials that won't be seen again?
So those are the equipment costs to get it going. That's a year one, which is actually a reduction from what Megan had mentioned. It actually is a cost savings. Not that that was the reason why, for sure, but it did help in our decision making, because in Project Lead the Way, you have to keep maintaining the equipment in order to maintain your status as a Project Lead the Way course. So
Lisa, you're live on the screen.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know. Dan, is that you? Yeah. Okay. So
no, it wasn't me.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jim, was that you?
I think that was Dan, but that's okay.
Okay, it's okay.
So yeah, the 14,000, what did I say it was? 14,000, that's the wrong page. My page went down.
About 15 grand, right?
Yeah, about 15 grand. Is the first year cost to get it up and running, because Project Lead the Way requires specific equipment. After that, it's more consumables, but it's a very low cost, usually less than $1,000 to maintain the consumables for the students to keep the course going. We do also just want to make sure we're very transparent about professional learning, right? When we bring in new programs, and I know I keep bringing this back, but we also make sure that any required training, and that includes other courses too. It's not just Project Lead the Way, but courses like AP courses, for example, because that was on my slide last night. Part of my budget is streamlining any professional learning that is required for teachers to update their training in order to implement some of these courses to support in the classroom. So if you run an AP class, you have to make sure that the teacher is AP certified and trained. If you run a Project Lead the Way course, they have to complete Project Lead the Way training as well. So that's also part of my budget request when I look at professional learning. So all these pieces come into play. And again, it's a one-time cost for that training, as long as that teacher maintains in their schedule that they're actually teaching that class.
Thanks. Can we move on? Let's move on to technology, if that's okay. Starting with Mr. DeVito.
Wait, I have a quick question. I know that we're going to have more meetings on this topic, but I think it would be helpful, and I don't think we need a detailed answer right now, Tina. As a matter of fact, it's probably the question I have probably does require coming back to the board.
Okay.
What I think would be really helpful for myself, and I'll let the other board members, speak for themselves, is I'm potentially oversimplifying parts of the budget request, but from where I sit, it seems like a lot of what you spoke about so far is a combination of new programs, either that the district is taking on as their own initiatives, like the VR stuff, state mandated programs that we have no choice but to take on, and then state curriculum changes that we opted to take on. I think from a budgeting perspective, it would be really helpful for me if I could see
Mhm.
what in this coming year's budget, what cost is associated with initiatives the district is undertaking as being a top performing district,
Mhm.
costs the district is incurring as a result of unfunded state mandates,
Yeah.
and costs the district is undertaking to implement programs that we opted
Yeah.
to. Right, because you've spoken a lot about the sills, which, we were, most of us, except for Michael, was here last year, this time where we approved the sills. ESSER funds, Michael Puppy's not even sure what ESSER funds are, and I'll gladly over a coffee or a beer, get him up to speed on ESSER funds. And we knew back a couple of years ago when we took ESSER funds, one of the questions I had was, what are we going to do when these funds disappear?
Mhm.
So it would be really helpful to understand how much in this budget, dollar wise.
Yeah, I'll try to synthesize the idea of new programs, updating programs, right? District choice versus required changes, right? And try to organize it into a chart with a number attached to it based on the budget. I think that's helpful maybe for all of us.
Yeah.
And I would also just want to make sure that we are aware, because we finished on science really quickly. When we talk about that secondary science curriculum instruction leader, science in Weston includes technology. So it's not just the science curriculum that we teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then biochem and physics. It also includes engineering and computer science and Project Lead the Way at the secondary level. So just want to make sure that we understand that with these positions, because I know Michael, last year we went through it a little bit more in detail. I'm not sure how much we're going to go into detail this year, but most all the SILs, the curriculum instruction leaders, support multiple content areas. So I know we focus a lot on literacy and math, but our literacy leaders also support social studies. And you'll see them a lot talk about literacy and social studies. In math, yes, they focus on math, but they're always talking about math and science. And science, when you get to the secondary level, talks about science and technology and computer science as well. So just want to make sure we understand it's not isolated here in Weston.
Yeah,
In
and
other
we-
districts that are bigger, they do have more focused, isolated support, but here we do expand and they do support multiple content areas.
And yesterday we did speak the central office administration team about, there are a list of unfunded mandates. And we can certainly give you the list. Some have costs around them, some don't. Like one of the latest that Steve sent me something about how people have to be able to read the website in different languages. Thank goodness that's something that they're just passing. Thank goodness we already have that in place. But there are other things. Probably the biggest thing, and we can elaborate more on that next week, is the David, the special education change in the legislation, where now students, the age went from 22 to 23. That's probably the biggest unfunded mandate that the state has given us, where if there are youngsters that are before they aged out at 22, now we have an entire extra year that we have to provide support for them. But we can get you the list. So we'll do the state mandates. Okay, well, I want to give you an overall of all of the state mandates, the ones that we specifically have attached funding to, and then the ones that are our initiatives, if you will, and what the cost is of that. And in some cases, as with the Project Lead the Way, it's actually a savings. It's not an increase, but a decrease in that line.
Yeah, and two things. And Lisa, I think it would be really helpful to share with the community and the public the additional cost of special ed is going to be because it's been extended to 23, just because it goes to show that there are cost drivers that we don't control. And if you really have a beef with some of these costs, we can provide the address for Hartford, right? I mean, there's some things that we have no say. We as a community have no say over, right?
Sure, exactly.
Right.
I think in broad strokes, people need to understand, for example, about the 23. I caution us to get too specific. I'm looking at Tracy because this is a small community and I don't want to talk in any way that would identify a particular family or student, but we can certainly do that because frankly, we've had to play it out. You know, when we look at where it's going, we have to keep that in mind. That's sort of our financial responsibility.
I'm just suggesting, like, let's just say it's a $300,000
Yes,
anticipated
understand.
cost, we just call out in the budget, or
Mhm.
however you would do it, that there's $300,000 as a
Mhm.
result of a change or a state
Sure.
mandate. And just to make sure too, when you kind of itemize the budget drivers, the cost of programs that the district is undertaking just because we're a top performing district, right? This more of the STEM stuff or the VR type of stuff. So, you know, there's the state programs that we've opted into, the cost to implement those, this unfunded state mandates that we have no choice, and then new programs that we're offering, what the cost is associated there. And then just to go back to one of the first questions I asked about, it was then, do we evaluate, and that would be a question that I'd probably bring up after I get the answers at our next meeting. How do we evaluate the success of the more legacy programs that we have? And where do we make the decision to no longer offer some of the legacy? Because we keep adding more and more to the menu, and it comes at a cost. And so
I would be, it does come with a cost, but a lot of it, there are reallocations. And the other thing is I think that we have to keep in mind, in looking at all of this, graduation requirements. You know, we have to meet the graduation requirements. So that would be another thing. Like now they're pushing, requirement for personal finance, requirement for this, requirement for that. So we can certainly pull all that together. I know, what was I going to say? It was mentioned last night, and not to put Tracy on the spot, but you know, when you say, it's going to be increasing, last night, Tracy actually gave a number where we're anticipating a decrease in some of the tuition. However, as she is always quick to remind us, someone could move into town tomorrow that requires a certain level of support. Tracy, I don't know if you want to say a couple quick things. And Tracy has popped in and out just to clarify, because she has had to go to a couple of very important meetings. Ms. Edwards.
Hi, good morning. A couple of things that I can respond to about this. First, I just want to be very clear about the legislation. The change in legislation, initially, a few years ago, there had been a change to students exiting on their 23rd birthday. So the 23rd year is not the new part. The new part of the legislation is that now students are eligible, those who require services until this age are eligible until the end of the school year where they turn 22. So it's important to note that if you have a July birthday, that's different than having an August or June birthday in this particular case. I'm happy to provide details. I don't have the number, honestly, today of what the implication is for the change in legislation for the upcoming school year. But yes, we are proposing a decrease in the tuition and settlement lines. Those lines are based very specifically on individual student needs. And as Lisa said, they can change at any moment. Those are our best estimates based on the information that we have right now about the students who are currently receiving services within our programs. So I don't know if that answers sufficiently. Again, I can get the number for the students who we're maintaining for a longer period of time based on that legislation change.
I mean, for my purposes, I think it's just helpful for the community to know that when we ask for, 300,000, I don't know the numbers that far off, but we had approved $300,000 to move the Sills to full time, and we have high expectations that they're going to perform well for us. So I think it would just be helpful for the community to know that there is if it's a $10,000 expense, which I know it not to be the case, it's a nothing. But I think it would be helpful just to let, it's not about singling out, it's about unfunded state mandate. So if we want to just lump it into an unfunded state mandate category, that would be fine too. But I think it's just if we get pushback on the budget, there's certain things that we can't change, right? So when you take out the things we can't change, and the community knows what those things are that we can't change, we don't necessarily run the risk of the community saying, take this elective course out of the high school. So I think it just in the concept of transparency, we don't need the details, just a rough dollar amount, changes to SPED requirements for 23 or whatever it would be. I mean, I know this community to be very supportive of our SPED students. It's not going to be punitive. It's reporting the facts.
Exactly. I mean, we've always been very supportive. This community has done a tremendous job. Everyone is our student. But as you said, these things are going on. Things are going on in Hartford that directly impact the taxpayers, to say it bluntly. Shall we turn to technology? Let's start first with something exciting, not the switches, sorry, Dan, but the virtual headsets that both the middle school and the intermediate school would like to pilot. Dan, if you could explain a little bit, and then Patty maybe comment on the enthusiasm that I know your library media specialist has about that.
Okay, so before I get started, Chad dropped off for a second. Do we want to hold this off until Chad comes back? Because I know this is one of the topics he wanted to discuss. So I think it would be a good idea just to solve any redundancy issues if we maybe.
Sure, you're right. You're good catch. Can come back to that.
Well, how about for the propeller head me? Let's talk about the switches and the refresh.
Yes,
because
that's true.
I can give the community my blessing or my personal blessing or my personal, you're crazy, Dan.
Yeah, and just to know, I do think we need these switches or whatever it is, because for some reason my camera keeps clicking off. So I don't know why. Get some switches over here, please. Mr. DeVito, take it away.
Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah,
So,
Dan, Lisa needs 10 gig fiber to her desk to fix her webcam.
no problem. I'll set it up as a lag too to make sure we're okay. All right, David, do you wanna kind of ask your questions first? Do you want me to give an overview? How do you want to handle this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what is the dollar amount? I don't have the.
Yeah, so the dollar amount for the total dollar amount or the dollar amount we're putting out for the switches?
I guess your big ask is a firewall and a 60 some odd switches.
Yeah, so we're looking to replace every single switch in the district. We have like 72 or 73 switches in the district. They are 10 years old. They are no longer supported by Brocade. So we're looking to replace them. We're going to be consolidating down, so we only need 65 switches. The switches were mostly 48 port, but we did have some 24 port. They're PoE switches. Sorry to bore everyone. We're combining down to 65 switches, 48 port, layer 2, layer 3 switches. And it really comes down to they're out of support, and we need to get them right sized and kind of fix some of the throughput we have in some of the buildings. So this isn't really looking at fiber, outside or building to building or point to point. This is more intra. So within the buildings, we're just trying to right size and make sure that we've got all the proper switches, and that we also we're future proofing our network, because these switches are the PoE plus, so power over Ethernet plus. And why does that matter? Security cameras. So new security cameras are power over Ethernet, and the current switches we have only have a finite amount of power that they can provide. Both our phones need power over Ethernet and our security cameras. So we're going to be future-proofing our district. A, we just need the new switches, and B, to make sure that as we get new security cameras, the switches can handle it without having to buy additional PoE injectors.
And what switches are you buying?
We're looking at Ruckus.
Okay.
Do you want to know the exact model?
No, I don't think that would really glossy eye everybody. No, and the per unit cost is at the $37.50?
Yep.
Okay. And how do you go about evaluating who the manufacturer is going to be? Only because, not to poison the well, I love Ruckus. I think they're going to get out of the switch business. That's just my personal feeling. So if it's a 10-year expenditure, what informs you guys about the manufacturer you use? Because that seems like a high from where I sit. You know, we've typically standardized, even for our K-12 clients, around the Cisco CBS series, not even the Catalyst,
Mhm.
and Aruba. So what informs you to go with that brand at what appears to me as a relatively high cost?
So this is the estimated cost. So mind you, this is going out through E-rate for bidding process as part of the discount. So they will probably come in a little bit less. But Ruckus, we did get a guarantee that they will be supported for the 10 years, at least the 10 years. So although you're saying that they may be getting out of the switch business, we do have it in writing that they will be continuing to support them. It really comes down to it's what our network backbone is already on. It is what myself and the network administrators are most comfortable with. I have nothing against Cisco. We just haven't been a Cisco shop over here. So we're looking at, as part of the bidding process, we're looking at not just the specific model. I said Ruckus because that's what we, Brocade Ruckus is what we currently have. However, as part of the bidding process, if we see a product that we evaluate that's less expensive, more robust, we will go to it, provided that the learning curve isn't too steep. Because we also want to take into account if there's a learning curve with a new product that, yes, it's more expensive, less expensive, but now we need to retrain everybody so we can properly make sure our VLANs are set up properly, then we're going to have an issue. Plus, from a transitional standpoint, from backing up to restore, it's easy to do that with what we have versus going over to Ruckus from a port-to-port configuration standpoint.
Okay, is it $37.50 before E-rate discount?
The $37.50 is before E-rate discount. The $146 is after the E-rate discount.
Okay. And what are you doing for access points?
Aruba. So this is year 2 of our access point refresh. So last year we purchased 175 Aruba APs. I think they're the 615s. We went to Aruba Central, and because kind of everybody's, you know how it is, pushing towards a subscription model, and that way we still have a controller on board or in-house. The 175 access points that we replaced this current year were for Hurlbut, WIS, and half of the middle school. The remaining 170 that we're looking to purchase this year are the other half of the middle school and all of the high school. And we're sticking with Aruba.
And the firewall?
The firewall, we're not married to anything. We currently have SonicWall, but we're looking at everything from SonicWall, Palo Alto, and Fortinet or FortiGate.
And how many firewalls? It says 2.
Two. Yeah, we have redundant firewalls.
Okay. All right. You and I should get together.
Okay.
Because yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Give me a call afterwards and we can catch up.
Okay. Is Chad back?
No, but I think Tracy wanted to say something.
Yes,
clarify
please. Thanks,
something.
Lisa. So I have the number, David, that you just requested. It's about $238,000. And we were talking about age 23, and I want to be crystal clear because I accidentally said the wrong age as well. In the first part of my discussion, it's age 22. So originally the legislation changed a couple of years ago that students age out on their 22nd birthday. Now they are aging out at the end of the school year where they turn 22. I just don't want to cause any confusion for the board or for families.
But that's a number that's a decent. I mean, grand scheme of things, it's not a big number, but it is a big number when people start talking about 0.5% of the budget or 1% of the budget. So, about 230,000 is, and that's based on who we know is in the district this year. We don't,
Correct.
right, it can't, right. So I think it would be helpful to at least, it's a big enough number that we may as well call it out so we know.
Understood.
Okay, how about we hold off a little bit more on the technology, the headset piece, and shall we talk about enrollment? Does that sound good? There are a couple things that I want to clarify about enrollment. And that is, so currently the projection is for 28 less students. And there are a couple things that we have to keep in mind when we look about enrollment, sort of big picture. All right, first of all, it's class size, right? And so if you look, for example, at Hurlbut's class size chart, I forget what page it's on, I think it's on like 4 or 5. 4, thank you, Laura. You'll see that, you know, K1 is different than 2. And so you kind of specify these are the sections and these are the number of kids if you have those sections. And then 2 through 8, again, you have class size, the range. Well, actually, it's 2 through high school. Looking at each kind of area, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Okay, first of all is we look at the sections. I'm talking now K5 or pre-K5. We look at the sections. We look where the sections fall. We look at the number of open seats. And that's really important because you don't want to enter a school year, for example, if we, let me just pick an example. If we had in, let's look at 3rd grade. Okay, we want 7 sections of 3rd grade. That's what we project. And that's 21 students, 21.1 per section. That gives us 20 open seats. So someone might say, because you can go to 24. Well, then why don't we go to 6 sections? If we go to 6 sections, we're at 24.7. Now, clearly you can't have 0.7 of a child. So then you go 24, 25. You're starting the year already over. And we can't do that. So what we have done, and I can share it with you, it may be helpful, is I did this last year, and I do it this year. We take the medium enrollment projections. We plot out how many sections per class within class size guidelines. And then we look at how many open seats we have. And we look at it very carefully, like I did it last year for the 10 years. I've done it again this year. Thank you, Dan DeVito, for helping me with the open seats. That's still something that, you know, you were great figuring out that formula. How many open seats do we have when we start the year? Now, last year, if you can remember, we had asked, budget to budget, we asked for 2 extra sections at the intermediate school because it was very tight at the intermediate school. Patty's shaking her head. And then there was some concern, why do we need these sections? Are you sure we need these sections? Now this year, budget to budget, we've asked for 2 more. So it's an increase of actual 2 more sections, but budget to budget, it's neutral. So Patty, why don't you talk a little bit about what happened last year? I know it came up in finance where they were like, well, you know, you should cut these sections. I was like, I'm not cutting the sections. If I don't need them, I will not fill them. And that's a big difference. I am not going to hire teachers to take over sections that we don't necessarily need. And as we track the enrollment all spring until through August, we make a decision on that. We also have to make sure that we have the ability to pay and not be constantly going back to the town saying, yeah, we need an extra section. We need an extra section. So this coming year, we have a situation at Hurlbut where there is 1 section less. And at the intermediate school, we need 2 sections from actual, but budget's equal. Patty, explain a little bit about what happened last summer and all these kids, quite frankly, moving out of state and even to Europe that caused us not to fill the section.
So I've been doing this for quite a while, and Lisa and I work really closely, and Board of Ed guidelines is and our enrollment is really the biggest driver in our budget. So we're constantly looking at enrollment. We're looking at who's here, who's coming in, and then weighing it. And I mean, I'm pretty conservative financially, so I carry that into my school life as well. And last year we ended up having 14 students withdraw, 7 of which went to Europe, which was like unheard of, really. It was just a really unique year. We've never had that. And then our numbers coming in were not quite as high as we've had in the past. Looking at our numbers this year, we do not have a big margin of new students. If you look at like 5th grade, they're projecting us to have 166 students for next year. We already have 164 4th graders. They're currently sitting in we had a new student that started this week. I've got another new 4th grader that's starting in 2 weeks. So that's giving me 2 new students to bring that up to the 166. So we're fairly confident that number is probably pretty accurate. And even like in 4th and 3rd grade, we're looking at small increases. And as Lisa said, 148 3rd graders, we can't put that into 6 sections or we're over at 25 classes. Right now, I mean, our 3rd grade and our 5th grade classes are big. We are max in several of our classrooms that are at 24. And half of our 5th grade is at 24 and part of our 3rd grade is at 24. So I think we're really conservative when we look at our class sizes and our number of enrollment, number of class sections that we're asking for. So
which I think, I'm glad, quite frankly. I'm glad we didn't hire the 2 teachers if we were able to sustain, but we can't go into the year being at 24, maybe having 1 extra seat. That's very concerning. You talk about the level of personalized instruction and all of that. That's very concerning. Laura, talk a little bit about Hurlbut and how we have 1 less section projected.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So right now we are, based on the median projections, we are looking at an overall school reduction of 1 section. And that is because our 1st grade class will be moving up into 2nd grade where the class size guidelines increase. So based on class size guidelines for the Board of Ed, we can go up to 24 in a 2nd grade class. I don't like to get anywhere near 24 in a class for a group of 2nd graders. They're still very young and we're still, really focusing on those foundational skills, building independence, and getting students ready for their next step, especially in a transitional year. But right now, we are looking at 6 sections of 2nd grade, which will be an overall reduction.
And so
I have can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
Have we changed our projection at all towards kindergarten? Because understanding that we have a smaller window in which students are going to be eligible, we're expecting, from my understanding from our enrollment meeting, a smaller kindergarten class this year, correct? And
yes.
If so, have we made an adjustment there?
Right. We did make an adjustment there. So we currently have 8 sections of kindergarten this year. It's a large class. Today we have 148 kindergartners. It's a good size class. Next year we are projected for a smaller group. So we reduced a section of kindergarten. That section moves up into 8th grade because we have 8 sections of kindergarten. They will move into 8 sections of 1st grade next year.
So it flipped.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
And that's what we did this current year. If you remember, we were surprised that, we had to flip our original projections of sections, but we flipped. So that's kind of neutral. And then we need 1 section left of 2nd grade. I'm sorry, Laura.
Yeah. And I think that's just another good example of, just like with the data and the needs of the students, we respond to what we see in front of us. If we have shifts and adjustments we need to make, we will do that. Incoming kindergarten, we always go based on the median projections, as Lisa referenced, and then we watch it very closely. Kindergarten registration is open right now. So, Lisa and I together, we keep a very close eye on that.
Okay. And just so you know, we looked at all the preschoolers that we had, and we looked at their birthdays with regards to moving on to kindergarten. Tracy helped us with that. Do we have enough sections of preschool? We contacted the preschools. We sent out the extra survey. We were really trying to make sure that we have the right number. But if you look at the number right now, so it's 7 sections. We have right now 12 open seats in kindergarten with the 7 sections. That's good, because that gives us a little bit of that wiggle room that we need. If we can't go to 6 sections because we'd be at 21 students. It's
That's
over the
right.
amount, starting
Yeah.
1.3. So some of those classes would be 22. So we just can't do it. But we are comfortable with that little bit of a window. And there were also some people I know in the community that said, well, why don't you open up some more preschool? We need preschool because we can't send our children. Our preschool is for special education students and like peers. And the like peers, I'm just saying this for the listening audience, pay tuition. It would be great to be, let's open up a preschool class. However, the cost of opening up that class with the level of teacher and para, it's very different than a preschool that's not affiliated with a public school. It's not cost effective. We would have to put money into the budget to be able to run additional preschool. And quite frankly, the preschools know that there may be an influx because of this change, and that's where those children are going to have to be accommodated, if you will.
Okay. And then just one other question, and this kind of goes back to our enrollment meeting. The first grade, this year's first grade cohort, it's a small cohort. And that is that something that you've seen across other districts, or is that unique to Weston?
I don't want to comment on other districts. I'm sorry, Sharon. I don't want to say anything off the cuff because I'm not really sure. It was surprising, and it was also surprising to Mr. What's his name?
Zuba.
Oh,
Zuba. Thank you. About that flip. I think the beauty, what we really have to focus on is making sure that we are fiscally responsible with our request for class sections, not hiring if we don't need, and to make sure that we have that little bit of buffer within the class size guideline. That's the best that we can get at it. As far as did Westport have more first grade? I don't know off the top of my head.
No, I'm just thinking about long-term planning with this group in particular. I don't really care about, there's nothing we can do about it, but I just want to make sure if this is something that's realistically going to be a small cohort going all the way through. I mean, it's surrounded by cohorts that are larger on both sides. So we're just going to have to continue making adjustments for that cohort as they move through the system. So
sure. And I want to jump to high school, and then I want to go back to the middle school with enrollment. So at the high school, 70% of our classes are mixed grade level classes. So what I mean by that is, you can go into a Spanish 4 class and you can have anyone from freshman to senior year in that class. So we try to honor the class, the numbers, the enrollment. If we have 4 kids sign up for a class, I'm sorry, we're not going to offer that class. That's how we look at it. Now, if we have, for example, 11 students that sign up for AP Chem, I'm kind of making this up, and Megan, feel free to give another example. We're going to offer that class because that's the top level chemistry class, and we need to have that class in the trajectory. There are certain sequences that we are going to make sure that we are able to offer. Now, will that result perhaps in another class being at 25, which is a little bit over a guideline, a section at 25? That can happen. You can have, like, world studies is a flat class all 9th grade. But when you schedule those students, some classes based on all the student selection, and we try to accommodate them, when you plug it into the system, you have how many singletons, Megan? Like 60 singletons. You need band, you need it this period. You can't go into that world studies class. So you'll see some variations, and you might look at the projected enrollment and be like, well, this isn't exactly within a couple of the, the guidelines. That's because it's the nature of the high school schedule. Megan, do you want to add to that? Please.
Yeah, sure. We have even more than 60 singletons. And I think in a school of 710 students, we really want to maximize what we can offer to students. We want students to individualize their schedule. We want to support them in pursuing the areas that they're passionate in. And we also have so many students who are so well-rounded. So they might take an AP or an honors course in the sciences, but they also want to be in an ensemble. And our schedule can be very tight. So we're really working on ways to also streamline our scheduling process. So we have all of the information that we have and we need when we hit run on our master schedule. And so those are some of the processes that we're working towards as well. And that includes like how students choose which classes they're going to take. In my week ahead over the last couple of weeks and over the next few weeks, that message is going to be loud and clear. Like, we really want everyone to be super thoughtful about their schedule, choose really wisely, because when it also comes to like movement in the fall, you know, because we take those course requests so seriously, we also want to limit that movement as we head into the next school year, because quite frankly, we may not have room to move. So we really, really want people to be, families, kids, to be really thoughtful about their schedules and make sure that they're balanced, while offer like a robust suite of offerings and varied offerings.
Thank you, Megan. I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on the middle school. Because, and I've been here a long time, Dan Doak's been in that seat a long time. I was in that seat previously. The middle school gets very complicated when you don't keep the pure team. Frankly, it becomes a junior high, which is where I went. And let Dan elaborate a little bit on that, because you might say, well, why are we holding it 8 sections? You know, gee, there are, and it's next year, that 6th grade is going to be only at 18. And then you follow that class through. Well, we should make it 7. You make it 7, you destroy the team model. And I'll be perfectly frank, when I look at the scores and I look at the years that we had that team model destroyed, particularly in math, that's where you got 30% of the standard level kids in 8th grade being prepared for high school. 70% were not. And we can in part trace it right back to the fact that those teachers were teaching off grade level. They were never available for meetings, planning, everything else. It was a mess. So Dan, why don't you take us through the importance of the workshop that we've now put in that's been highly successful, and the importance of the pure team model.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I alluded to it yesterday in the opening presentation. We went through a period of time where we really had a lot of inequity here in the middle school. We had some students who were on a pure team. They had access to their teachers during the school day. Parents had access to all of the teachers on the team for parent conferences, which at the middle school we do throughout the year. Our teaming model allows teachers on a team time in their schedule to not only meet with their curriculum partner on the opposite team, but also to meet frequently with their members, the interdisciplinary members of their team. And part of that is to allow for parent conferences. So unlike perhaps the elementary level, where you can reduce a section and that might equate to one person, to one teacher, it's much more surgical at the middle school, because one section means 0.2 English, 0.2 math, 0.2 science. So you end up with part-time teachers. And that was why we had a situation where we had teachers teaching off grade level as well as off team, and really destroyed what we said was the true middle school model. So when we saw a couple years ago, I spent many meetings with the curriculum committee. Some of you may remember those meetings, as we looked at ways to preserve the middle school teaming model and actually improve our educational outcomes. And that's how we developed the academic workshop model, similar to what Sachs Middle School over in New Canaan does. We looked at some of the neighboring schools to see how they were structuring their middle school. And we also looked at our curriculum in those 4 academic areas and asked the teachers and the curriculum instructional leaders to look at some of the standards for that grade level that were getting short attention, some things that we need to really expand. And we developed quarter-long workshop classes in each of those 4 areas that attacked not only some academic goals and objectives, but we discovered very quickly also had a wonderful impact on the social emotional well-being. It really strengthened the team, because each quarter students get one of their 4 academic teachers for an additional class in a smaller setting, which really adds to that personalization and individual attention at the middle school. So Lisa, that's kind of the overall. Am I missing some of the big
Yeah,
points?
you're missing about making up tests, extra
Oh,
help,
yes, I'm
all
sorry.
of
Yes,
that. That's
yes.
really important.
Thank you. Yeah, because part of that is, along with the academic workshop, the last 15 minutes of that is time for students to go get extra help, see their teachers on their core team, because again, that team, those 4 teachers are all free at the same time. And physically, they're located next to each other. So it's very easy for those teachers and those students to connect and meet as part of that workshop block. Thank you.
So a teacher then, not to belabor it, teaches in social studies, they teach 4 classes, and then their 5th class is academic workshop, and they meet half of the students every other day, correct?
Well, it's not,
In that quarter.
half of the students. It's, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So in short, that's where I think that when people look at the budget and they think, well, we could do this, we're not going to dismantle this for a couple of years. We've seen the results, and I don't think that I certainly would not support that again.
And back in the day when we went through all of those meetings, we looked at long-term projections, and we looked at we knew that there was going to be times when it was close. It was I think the class size dips down to 19 instead of 20. But we feel strongly that it's essential to preserve the middle school teaming model.
Thank you, Dan. So that's kind of an overview of enrollment. I don't know if there's any specific questions anybody has on enrollment or a particular course.
Lisa, can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
I do actually think I think it's important to know what our neighbors are doing in terms of class size.
Okay.
If our class sizes are all at 25, let's assume that's a working number, and and our neighbors are all at 20 or 21. I mean, one of the comments will be, am I going to get it? If I'm considering, everyone's concerned about housing values. If I'm going to get a better education for my children in the surrounding community because their class sizes are smaller and there's greater attention, I mean, we should be aware of that. I mean, all the conversations today have been around cost, but there's a basic level of education that we have to deliver. That's not only what we're delivering from an educational point of view, but we do need to be cognizant that, we're in a dynamic geographic area. And if there are better AP courses or better middle school courses or better elementary school courses, in our neighboring communities, people will take that into consideration. I mean, if there was a real estate agent, on this call, they'd say, well, yeah, we're in competition with the surrounding communities. So I'm very cost conscious, as an individual, but I do have to recognize we do have an obligation to provide the very best education we can for our children, and we need to do it. And because they're in a competitive environment as individuals, and we're in a competitive environment as a community. So despite the fact we're a small community, a term we keep using, that doesn't mean we're not obligated to provide the very best level of education that we can. And there'll be a cost to that.
Sure.
There was a slide. Lisa, I think you sent us a slide, or we have a slide with class sizes of surrounding towns. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm asking Dan to pull it up right now. This was from last year's budget, but it's basically the guidelines that stay the same, if you will.
Right.
And to your point, Steve, you're absolutely right. People want to know the class size at the lower levels. They want to know about the teaming. That's why, quite frankly, we did take New Canaan's model of the academic workshop and certain things at our middle school. And then the other thing is people will look at the program of studies at every high school. And I can tell you that our program of studies is as rich as the Durgay, but that's where you see, do they offer Project Lead the Way? How many languages do they offer? What are the top levels that they offer? All of that. But Dan, I shared it with you. Can you pull it up? Thank you.
1 second, I'm getting it up. Hang
Yeah,
on.
you can give me access too. I have it up if it helps.
It's based on, well, I know the class size guidelines haven't changed in these jerks. We
Right.
talk all the time. And it's kind of based on their budget from last year, but we are right pretty much where we need to be. So if you can just hone in on that top chart and not the bottom, the blue is last year's, but so if you look, you can look at the class size where you look at Darien K1, it's actually a couple more kids. But when you look at what it is in practice, it's not. The other thing that we have to be aware of, and they're all right there, you can see them, is at Darien, I think there's 5 elementary schools. So it can ebb and flow. You could be in one elementary school where there are 22 kids in a kindergarten, and then you could be in the other elementary school where maybe there's 19 because they have multiple schools. Same thing with Westport. But I would say that we are pretty much in line with comparing last year budget to budget. We can certainly look at it again for this year, which we will, but the guidelines are pretty much where they are. It's always, they call them guidelines, planning ranges, that kind of thing to give us wiggle room, but nobody goes over 24 except Wilton at 25. But then again, when you look at Wilton's numbers, actuality is not that. So we can update this chart for you if that's helpful. We're also going to be able to get the program of studies. It's going to, I know it's going to be finalized this month, right, Megan? So you can look at the rich array and we can do some, a little bit of comparisons within the programs in the DIRG. One thing that I think is important to note when you look at programs, though, for example, is, and Randy Green always says this, if we do not offer a particular course, for example, I don't know, let's say it was computer integrated manufacturing, which we're not going to offer anymore, or not this year, right? When students apply to college, let's say it was an engineering student, because we don't offer it, that student is not penalized. If we didn't offer, for example, AP music theory, and someone wanted to go to music school, now we offer it. We didn't about 8 years ago. The student, though, is not penalized in the application to college because the school doesn't offer it. Now, that being said, I would stand behind our program of studies comparing to anybody in this DIRG, how rich it is and how comprehensive it is. You can take that down now, Dan, if you want.
Before you take it down, can we just
Sorry.
It's okay. I was just testing Dan. One of the things that has come up over the years that I've been on the Board of Ed is we use the word guidelines.
Yes.
And I have a friend who is on the BOE for ER9, and him and I have these conversations that we're all probably having as districts, which is what informs the guideline? What is the educational outcome if you go one more student? So like my question is, yes, we want to be conscious of what other towns are doing. Yes, we want to attract people to the town. If we could tax ourselves out of running against Wilton or Westport. So my question is, how and when did we last visit the guidelines as it relates to an educational outcome? So for example, you mentioned, which I agree with, Wilton's guidelines are up to 25 students. They don't seem to be going there, but their Board of Ed gives them the ability to go there. Each year that we've had this conversation, we talk about the guidelines being guardrails, and we can't go outside the guardrails. So when's the last time we as a district looked at the educational impact of going to 23 students or 22 students at the K or the 1 level?
The last time, probably years ago. But I will tell you this, just sort of how I feel about that. I mean, yeah, there are studies that say that at the high school level, you can push the numbers a little bit more. Most of the research that has been done on this specifically targets the lower grades that they need to have lower enrollment. That's where the effect is. If you have a class of 28 kids at high school, is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. But you could do it. However, I think we have to be cautious about some of this research, because when you look at student-centric design, student empowerment, having students be able to own their learning, what's going on, for example, in these math classes, what's going on in these reading classes. You know, we've all done school, but the way school is being done now in the classrooms and the way we want more of student agency and student centric design lessons require lower numbers, especially at the elementary school, especially with the little children. I don't know, Laura, if you want to speak to that. I mean, that's the biggest question the parents ask. How many kids are going to be in my kindergarten class?
Right.
Laura?
That's the number one.
The basis of my question, though, isn't so much put 25 kids in K or 1. I think we as a board and you as the superintendent and all the educators I know would never be on board with that. It's looking at, can we increase the number of students by 1 for guideline purposes, so that if we do have a situation where going from 22 to 23, if it's known, not the magic number, what is the magic number where the scales tip, especially, which we don't probably have the data, how many times do we have other educators in the classroom? Which I think at the lower level, I know that we have paras and we have educators assigned to some of our special needs students. What is the downside to revisiting the academic impact of going to 22 or 23 students, but so that we have that flexibility, but not intent, where we want to have a small class size?
I guess.
So if you're gonna,
let me ask something. I'm a little bit confused, because clearly K1, I wouldn't recommend in that touch. What age group are you talking about, David? Because if the high school right now, we do have classes that are over. These are guidelines. We have classes that are 26, 27. Are you talking about intermediate? Are you talking about K5? You know, we explained why we need it it's more of a structural issue at the middle school. Which classes? I mean, you know, these are
I am asking from an educational perspective. I don't have the answer. The lower grades, I think we know the high school is always the one-off, and I think the Piratini model has been widely agreed to be the right way to do it. So really, I think we're looking at, quite honestly, I think we're looking at maybe the grades 1 and 2.
Grades 1 and 2 to raise it. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think if you're talking about changing guidelines, that does lead to intent to then increase class sizes. Why else would you expand the guidelines unless we're then going to increase the class sizes? So I feel very strongly about class size level at the K2 level. Lisa knows this. We talk about it all the time. It is critical at those younger years. We're talking about, you know, this year, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds who are learning how to be in school, who are learning strategies for learning, who are building foundational skills and conceptual understanding. And every child you add to the class does impact the teacher's ability to individualize and personalize. And Weston is known for that. We look at each child every day as an individual, and what does that child need in that moment? So it may seem like, well, it's a big deal just to add 3 students to a class. If a teacher needs 20 minutes with each one of those students, you're talking about an hour out of the day, out of a 5-hour instructional day. You know, you take out lunch and recess. So all of those contact points with a child are powerful for a teacher. And every child in the classroom that you add deserves that individual attention. That's that promise Lisa talks about, that we make a promise to each child that walks in our door that we are going to be responsive to them, and we are going to give them exactly what they need while they are with us for that critical period of time. It's very powerful at the elementary level. If you see what goes on in an elementary classroom, the dynamics, the interactions, that sense of belonging that a teacher builds, you know, they are teaching every content area at the elementary level: science, social studies, reading. And reading is complex. You know, we really dove deep into the science of reading. It is a very complex way to teach. Math, responsive classrooms, so that the students have the sense of belonging and they're learning social skills. A lot of the emotional intelligence lessons are done by the classroom teacher, that one teacher who's with those students for for the majority of their day here. And it is the number one question I get from families when they come here: how many students are in a classroom?
And just to clarify,
Phil, can I make a comment? So we're talking about class sizes. If we ran, Lisa, if we said, okay, we're going to increase class sizes to whatever the guideline is. How many teachers would that save? 1, 2, 3? And what's that number in cost? I mean, if you're talking about saving 8 teachers across the school system on a $59 million budget, that's not a heck of a lot of money. But it may,
let me look at something.
it may, to Laura's point, change the quality of the education that we're providing. So there's always that trade-off.
Yeah, so let's look at first grade, for example, okay? In first grade, we're recommending, if we went down a section, let's say we went down a section in first and second grade, that would be 2 FTEs.
$250,000.
From 6 to 5, that would be two FTEs. How much is an FTE, Phil? About 120?
Be a quarter of a million. It'd be $250,000.
Yep, round numbers.
You would be starting the year in second grade, if we went down a section, 26.4 students. That means some classes would be at 27. That means that they would be 5 over the guidelines. If you did it for first grade and you went down to 7, we would be starting the year at 22 students, 2 over the guidelines.
Just to clarify my point, I'm not suggesting that we had 2 or 3. The basis of my question was, when did we last revisit the guidelines? And how do the guidelines, or where do we go to determine what the academic outcome is, how it's impacted if we added within the guidelines 1 student per section at the lower levels?
Within the guidelines or expanding the guidelines? Because it sounds like you want to expand the guidelines. No, is that not your intent?
I'm not the expert. That's my question. My question is.
Yeah, no, I understand the question. So what I would say to you is let's say we added 3 kids per every class in first and second grade. And you say, well, how can we trace that to the academic outcomes? Did we get a better academic result? The thing that we need to consider is these are children. So who are these 3 extra kids that we're putting in the class? Are they special education students? We can't say that by adding 3 kids to every class that it's going to decrease or increase academic outcomes, specifically scores, when we're dealing with children. We're not dealing with widgets. So we need to take into consideration how those children are educated, what their program looks like. To your point, some children might have a parent in the room, some children don't. What does their day look like? There are a lot more things that we have to consider than that. You're not going to find something that says, if you add 3 more people, this is the academic outcome that you get. Because as we know, even when we look at college acceptances and we say, why did this senior class, perhaps this is the outcome compared to another class? They're kids. It depends on their academic standing and their ability. So I want to caution us to say, if we pump up this by the students a few times, how will that do? I know that it will take away from the connectedness that they have in the classroom, which Laura and Patty talk about. We know that if a student does not feel comfortable and safe and known by name and connected with adults, that they don't do as well. But there's not going to be, I guess I would say, some very specific formula. Ms. Saketa, you can check the last time we reviewed board guidelines. If people want to take it up at the policy committee, that would be the place to take it up to see if you want to bump it up. I think we have flexibility now. I would caution us from changing it, quite frankly, because when you look at the Durgay and where the rubber meets the road and people are buying houses in town, they hear that there's going to be 24 kids in their first grade class. I don't know how quickly they would come to Weston.
And just, I want to clarify, just so if people go back and watch this in the future, I'm asking about 1, not 2, not 3. I'm asking if we increase the guidelines by 1, which doesn't say how many students we're going to put in a classroom. It gives flexibility. So if we wind up, and I don't have a quick calculator here, but if we wind up with a guidelines of 21 would require 7 sections or 6 sections of a grade, and guidelines of 22 would require 5. We have found ourselves in the past having to add a section that nets out 18 kids into a classroom.
Mhm.
So that's
So the other way, like
right.
fourth grade.
So the basis of my question, and my children are currently going through Weston schools, and there is no doubt as a parent, the smaller the classroom size, the better. But, excuse me, it does come at a cost. We have to be, it's my theme. Are we on a trajectory that is sustainable? So my question, just to clarify one last time, and I think that at that point we're done, I'm asking about looking at the guidelines and where appropriate, potentially adding 1 seat to a section as a guideline. Doesn't mean we're going to put 22 kids in a classroom, but it gives us flexibility in the future to potentially not have to add a section that winds us up with 18 kids in the classroom.
You know what? It might be helpful to look at the projections. Dan, can you please put it up, the chart you worked on for, let's look at first grade to understand, because it's not really just adding 1 and we can see the impact. You know which one I mean? Medium 10-year update, 23, 24 sections, open seats. Can you please put that up?
Yep, give me just 1 second.
Thank you.
The one I worked on.
Ms. Saketa checked, and the class guideline policy has not been revisited since 1991. So if you want to revisit it, we can certainly revisit it.
So Lisa, the Weston projections medium 10-year
The medium
update.
10-year, open up Hurlbut and let's look at first grade.
You got it.
Thank you.
This one? Lisa?
It gives you the number.
Yes, sorry. So let's look specifically at first grade. Can you make it smaller to look at first grade? Okay. So if you look at first grade and you have currently 128 students, we have 7 sections, 18.3 was 12 students. If we had added extra kids, 1 per section, again, it's where it splits, we would have been at 6 sections at 21.3. That's over the guideline. The guideline is 20. So next year we propose 8 sections, 19.3, 6 open seats. If we went to 7, we'd be at 22. That's over the guideline. Yes, we would. There aren't any spaces we're over. If you look at the year after that, we go 8 sections. That would bring us to 17.9, which is a little bit low. We could go to 7 that year in 26, but that gets us at 20.4, which is over. And then there's 3 spaces. So this is kind of how it falls when you look at it. If you look at grade 2 and you look at the 132 projected for next year, we have 6 sections at 22, open seats 12. If we went to 5, we'd already be over and we would be at 26.4. So I think we have to be a little bit careful of, well, if we stretch it to adding 1 more, what would it do? You kind of get a sense of the number that it would increase or decrease. As I said, the policy hasn't been revisited since 1991. And interestingly, it doesn't talk about max in certain things, but this is kind of a sense of how we look at this.
One of the things that we did as part of this exercise that we work on every year with the class sections is to see the cusp numbers. So when you look at, for instance, we're going to go grade 1 in 25-26, right? There's 17 open seats with 8 sections. But just reducing that 1 section takes us over the guideline. So it's that weird spot where it looks like we have a lot of open seats available. We should be able to reduce sections. But in fact, 1 section reduction takes us over guideline. So I just wanted to kind of go over, because this chart pulled up is a lot to take in.
We have the number, right? Phil gave us the number of what reducing by a single section what it saves in cost, which is effectively $125,000. So we know what the number
Per
is.
teacher.
Per
So you
teacher.
do it in all 5 grade levels, you bump up the class size, you're saving, counting kindergarten, what, 6 teachers times 125. That's what it would be.
Right.
But my point,
And the trade-off, excuse me, and the trade-off is getting back to what Laura and others have said, is there's a difference in the quality of education between 18 or 20 kids and 25 kids. And so we as a board have to make a determination of the quality of education versus saving, whatever that cumulative amount of money is on a $59 million budget. It's a trade-off.
This chart, though, exemplifies the guideline question I'm bringing up. So if you look at and this is a chart representing what we know today, and can be very different as we know as early as July, right? I mean, things change, who knows who's moving into town. But my point is, because of these guidelines, if things don't change and we don't consider increasing the guidelines by 1, not us just from a budgetary perspective, but understanding the educational impact by 1. Steve, you keep mentioning 23 or 25 kids in a classroom. I don't think anyone wants to go there. We're talking about, if we look at this chart.
But that's what the number is, David.
It's not. If you look at, unless Dan,
well,
then
if you cut, no. It's just pure math. If you want 25, 26, are we going to cut it down to 6 sections? The math doesn't work.
Okay, so if I'm looking, then I'm looking at the chart incorrectly. If I'm looking at the chart for 25, 26, it appears to me that we will have 7 sections in order to make the guideline of 21 or fewer. I'm sorry. We will have 7 sections, which will be 17 kids per, or is it?
No.
So you want me to, Dave, you want me to help you with that one?
Yeah.
So looking at the current chart, this is based on the max of 20 students per class. So you're looking at option 1 for 25, 26, 8 sections of students for an average of 17.9 students per classroom. That gives us 17 open seats that will keep us under the current guideline of 20 students per classroom. If we went down to 7 sections with the same enrollment of 143, that would bring us to a class size average of 20.4, and we would be 3 students over the guideline. So which means that 3 of the 7 sections would need an additional student.
Right. Okay. Then I am looking at the chart correctly. I got my colors wrong. So if the guidelines were 21 for that same year, can you dynamically update the chart?
So basically what would happen is if you updated it to 21, I'll show you. We would now be 4 over. We'd have 4 open seats if we went to 21 with 7 sections.
Right. And that's my point. And I am not an academic expert, but I'm asking, when we have revisited we have a budget constraint based on our guidelines right now, that in 25, 26, we will be forced into an additional section, which if the numbers bear out, and I understand they can change and they can change across multiple age groups, but the guidelines right now, if they were to stay, which is what we're basing things on, we're going to have 18 children per section. But if the guidelines allowed us the flexibility of adding 1 more student, we wouldn't need 18 sections. We wouldn't need 8 sections. And then the question becomes, but is it academically worthwhile? And as a superintendent and educators, you can say we're not willing to do it. And it puts my conversation to rest. I'm just bringing this into conversation.
I'm not willing to do it. And it's because in 1st grade, they learn to read. When you talk to the second grade teachers, they frankly wish their classes were smaller. Sorry, we're not going there, but I wouldn't do it for first grade. K1, it's just too important. I couldn't see it. And I get what you're saying. That's why we do this, because, you know, these are all projections. I looked at last year's, I did the same thing compared to this year's chart. We have to be very responsible in what we are doing with these sections, what grades we're doing it in. For example, first grade, you know, they learn to read. I mean, and then in the intermediate school, they read to learn, right? Did I get that right, ladies?
Yes.
So we have to be
Yes.
very careful. You look, for example, at sixth grade. You might say, well, sixth grade enrollment's a little bit low for next year. We've already talked about the teaming model. Sixth grade's also a huge transition. So you want to make sure that we take that into consideration. You know, I don't have any problem if you want to revisit the policy. It was from 1991. It can be brought forward to the policy committee for the following year. But rest assured, when we look at these very carefully, we only fill it if we need it. You know, to be frank, we could have kept those extra sections in at the intermediate school. And those sections would have been a little bit lower in, right, Patty, in third and fourth grade, but we didn't, because it was like, no, we're entering September in a good place. And as predicted, it went up a little bit over the year, but we're still in a good place. But the policies were 1991. The policy is 6151, if anybody wants to look it up, about class size. And interesting enough, and again, it sort of speaks to the history and being fully transparent, it talks about class size shall be no less than 15 students. It doesn't say anything else about the ranges in any other in the policy. So these,
It doesn't have a max?
No,
It doesn't.
no.
So, okay, so I have a question. What are the state guidelines as far as class size is concerned?
I don't even know if there are state guidelines, because, you know, maybe Dr. Henkel, you can talk a little bit to that, or even Bernadette sizes. You can go into some of the city schools and those classes can be up to 28 kids in a class.
Yeah, well, that's not something that we necessarily want to duplicate here, but I was just curious if there were guidelines. Obviously, we want to stay with closer to what Durgay is doing, so that we're making sure that we're.
I don't believe so, because that would be a real unfunded mandate.
And Sharon, I can answer a question for you, which I think would be helpful. It doesn't, I'm not making an argument for or against. I'm, you know, as we're going through budget, I'm trying to ask questions, and I'm respectful of Lisa saying she's not willing to do it. And I support Lisa. I don't necessarily like her answer, but I support Lisa. So just to answer your question, Sharon, Governor Hochul recently signed a law in New York City, I believe, that the maximum class size for kindergarten through third grade, I believe, is 20 students.
That sounds, I mean, that's in line with what we're doing here.
Same side though.
Is our
Go ahead,
is
Bernadette.
our policy in the teacher contracts as well? So if we
Not in ours.
Not in ours.
Nope, not in ours. Some teacher contracts do, like Lisa mentioned, in the larger cities, they're very clearly defined, but they are much higher. From an educational perspective, just throwing it out there, when you're thinking about the learning design in the classroom, the research supports groups of 3. So wherever possible, when we're thinking about the numbers in the classrooms, like 18 would be ideal, 21 would be ideal, because we're able to design the learning, because the research says teams and groups of 3 is ideal to maximize learning. One other piece that we might want to, if we're going to revisit this and go down this road, there is research there is not, I haven't found a lot of current research, but around some class size and what you asked David about the effect on student achievement. What most of it found within the 24 states that they did, Connecticut being one of them, was that unless you're going to significantly cut the class size by 7 to 10 students in a chunk, there is no effect. So for the report that I was reading, was that if they went from 22 students to 15 students, the return on investment was around 3 months worth of academic achievement. But again, the numbers that they used was, 15, 22 was the max when they looked at the class size. And in some states, like Connecticut being one of them, there was no change in student achievement when they went from 22 students to 15 students. So I just wanted to throw it out there. Anybody can look it up. But from an educational design perspective that we've always done with teachers, when you're looking at like project-based learning activities or small group activities in the classroom, we always tell teachers that the ideal combination or group size is 3. So if we translate that into numbers, as far as like numbers in a class and a roster, then it would be 18 and it would be 21. If we're looking at the numbers on the screen.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying too, David, as far as like, you're talking about an increase of 1, not an increase of 3 or 2 or 3, whatever. I get it. But I also think that especially for Laura and Hess, I think that is probably where we are class size most sensitive. Because again, the learning to read versus reading to learn. Once they transition into WIS, I think that there can be a little bit more of an expansion, and then we could maybe talk about it. Who knows? That would be something that would be a great conversation. And of course, middle school and high school are different. But I think that, if we're looking for staff savings, which of course, I think we're always trying to find ways to be fiscally responsible. I don't think that Hurlbut is necessarily for instruction in Hurlbut is the place to look, because we want to set these kids up educationally for the rest of their career, and that really the basis is really set in Hurlbut. So I think that there are other areas maybe that we could look at, but I personally am I'm in agreement with. I could hear Laura's voice rise on that one, and I understand and I agree. So anyway,
I have to say thank you, Bernie, for mentioning the contract, and thank you, David, for bringing it up, because in the contract for teachers it says the establishment is class size is a matter of board policy, and it also says the superintendent will discuss with the Board of Education at least once a year, so we're doing it now, the implications of class size. It's right there in the contract. So again, in summary, if you want to look at it from the policy point of view, we can certainly, right, Sharon, add that to our list of policies, but we've had the discussion or begun a discussion. So thank you.
Chad's back if you wanted to move over to the VR
Sure.
headset.
Anything else on enrollment before we move to the exciting pilot of the goggles?
Yeah, I've been listening. Sorry, I dropped off before. I've been battling some illness over the holiday break and not feeling great. But I will just chime in. First of all, Tina, thank you for bringing some data to that conversation. I think some of these decisions we have to make a little bit blind. This one we don't. I think there's actually quite a lot of data about class size, and everything seems to point to teachers are really at the heart of the educational effort, and that teachers and students, this is the core of what we do. So if we're looking for places to try to maximize savings, I'm very skeptical that increasing class size is the place to put our energy. Now, I recognize that you just wrapped up that conversation, and I don't want to get us back into that, but I'm just listening to the whole thing for the last, multiple minutes, and I would share Sharon's skepticism about if this is the right place to try to carve away budget. Anyway, with that, yeah, sure, onto VR. Thank you for transitioning.
All right, so I wanted to go over the VR headsets, just explain what the plan is, why we're doing it, what the research shows behind it. So to clarify, what we're looking to purchase are 1 class set, so 25 VR headsets for the intermediate school and the middle school. They will reside in the media center, and the media specialists will work with the classroom teachers to use the VR headsets to provide a aligned, immersive experience using the VR headsets in ways that they can't right now. So it's not buying a class set of headsets for every single classroom. That's not what we're looking to do. That's not what we'll ever look to do. So this is just 25 VR headsets. And virtual reality is becoming more and more important. It's part of a daily lives for a lot of kids. A lot of kids ask for the Meta Quests for birthdays and for holidays. But beyond that, it is showing more and more to create an engaging experience for students in an educational space. So to just give some examples, right? Providing science, VR in science education, it's incredible. It allows students to do things like chemistry that they're not able to do in a safe way in a normal classroom, or biology, for instance, or going to a different planet and seeing what the effects of gravity are like when you're in a VR headset. Even visiting the International Space Station, and not a cartoon International Space Station, the actual ISS that has recordings, 360-degree recordings. And so you can see what it's like to live in a weightless environment and to see the experiments they're currently performing with plants in the International Space Station. It allows students in history to go visit places of interest that we simply can't visit because it would be too expensive to go visit Stonehenge or the Colosseum. And it allows them, again, real, not cartoon, but actual people do these 360-degree virtual tours. So you can go anywhere and have an immersive virtual virtual field trip. And that term virtual field trip has been around for a while, but there's different types of virtual reality, right? There's augmented reality, and then there's a fully immersive experience. And we're looking to go with the fully immersive experience because it taps into a student's creativity. It actually keeps them focused, and studies show that it provides a deeper learning than if they're just watching a video on, again, I'm going to go back to just Stonehenge because I'm just picking it out there. It allows them to just thoroughly focus because it's their entire world. Wherever you look, you are there when you're in a virtual reality environment. Even taking it beyond that, you can use virtual reality in art education. They can use painting tools and virtual galleries. There's just so much they can do. And I've waited a couple of years to bring this on because I didn't feel that VR in education had enough content. And now we are reaching that point where there is a lot of content, and there's a lot of content being created. And everything is done not just in an individual experience, but like Tina said, you can do it in groups of 3. You can do total classroom experiences where you're looking in a virtual reality, let's say lab, and you see your classmates in there, and you're working with them to hand things off and to work on things. So it just provides an incredible experience that frankly they couldn't provide for certain aspects before. And so getting deeper into it, from a research perspective, they've done tons of research and statistical analysis on VR headsets and education. I will stress, we are not looking to provide an 8-hour virtual reality experience. These are 30 minutes, 40 minutes max experiences to just provide a specific lesson. And studies show their distraction goes down, their creativity goes up, and their anxiety levels go down when they're in a virtual reality session. There's just reading a couple more studies just so we know that we've done our due diligence. Immersive VR, when compared to like semi-immersive and non-immersive, just the standard, includes a deeper learning experience where the students actually commit to memory more of the stuff that they're learning. And it's short experiences, so under 2 hours, are more effective than longer experiences. And that's why I'm stressing we're not looking to do an 8-hour virtual reality session, and we're not looking to do it daily with every single student. That's why we're keeping it to 25 VR headsets for an entire school that will then be shared accordingly, working with the teachers and the media specialists.
They're going to fight for them.
And they will fight for them. People have been asking for this for years, and I've been hesitant because I just didn't feel that it was there, and it's there now. And I encourage WTNH, I know I'm giving a random plug, but WTNH has every week they show like what's going on, what's right in education. And the most recent one was VR headsets at a high school in Northern Connecticut, and all the amazing things that they're doing that they just simply, a school district can't afford to do in person, but they can do virtually. So it's just the possibilities are limitless.
Patty,
Can I
do you
jump
have
in with a
anything
question,
to
Dan? Oh,
add?
sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I'm sorry, Patty, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I know that we're really excited about it. Shelley is, you know, has listed so many ways that we can use these. And you're right. It's used to augment and to enrich the curriculum. It's not replacing the curriculum.
Right.
It's making it, it's doing things that, you know, like in fifth grade, we talk about the Revolutionary War. We can't go to Boston. I mean, the cost of that would be, but we can be in Boston on a headset. Space. I mean, we made great strides with using our Amplify program, but it's not the same as what this would bring us. And you're right. And it's thoughtfully weaving in these programs with what we're already doing, just to make the curriculum come more alive and more real to our students. It's very exciting.
I will jump in and I will say from a use perspective, there's almost zero learning curve with virtual reality headsets. You put the headset on, you put the two arm things in, and that's it. There's one button and you push, and that's how you grab. So there is zero learning experience on how to use virtual reality headsets. So there's nothing insane with that aspect of learning how to use them. The programs are very intuitive.
And the cost?
And the cost is, as of right now, it's like $299 per unit. But
Total cost for this initiative?
The total cost for the 60 headsets, for the 50 headsets is $15,000.
Thank you.
Dan, can I jump in with a question?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, great. So the first thing is I do see the value in this. I actually, believe it or not, in my online work, we built a VR headset for our clients way back when in 2015. We had a hard time driving adoption because that was still a point at which people felt a little bit of motion sickness and disorientation when using a whole bunch. But anyway, it has moved along quite a lot. So the first thing I want to say is I always want to be a voice not against technology, but rather about how we use it. I'll give you an example. Not only have I been heartened to see in the curriculum committee the way we're using digital learning, but I'll give you one really fun example. My daughter was having some challenges with spelling, and her teacher did this cool thing where using some software to create crossword puzzles that feature certain specific spelling words that my daughter needs to work on. Well, of course, a machine can do that much, much faster than I can dream up, interlocking words within a crossword puzzle. So it's a perfect example of how you can use technology to drive some learning. So my question on this would be around two things. One, money, and number two, how are we using it mindfully? And so some of the use cases you gave me seem very persuasive, meaning I do know, in fact, that VR gets used in industry all the time to help people sort of teleport into hazardous waste cleanup places, things like that. So the chemistry example you gave is great. I think probably very useful. Others about, visiting certain historical places, I'm much more skeptical about that for a couple reasons. One, we have to keep in mind what are the unintended consequences of continually trying to give our kids an experience of technology as some sort of substitute for the real thing. This is much less a critique. I'm not trying to say it as a critique of that particular activity, but just making sure if we do this, that we bring a tremendous amount of mindfulness to, is this adding to their learning? Is it substituting? Is it reducing in some way? And then the other question is on the cost side, which is that $15,000 to me sounds pretty nominal, but then over time, is this a program that we're looking to expand to more headsets? How frequently would they have to be replaced? Things like that. I know that we've had to do the Chromebooks every so often. Of course, technology changes quickly. So those would be some of my questions. But I do see the value in trying to give this very cutting edge kind of technology experience to our students. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet because I know I often dominate this conversation subject. I really do think across the board with technology, the more, and I'll use Peter Gordon's quote here, the more that we can teach our students how technology works, not just how to work technology. We're going to equip them for the future better. So it's not just put on the headset and move your hands around, but actually an understanding of what is happening on the back end to make these sorts of things possible. I think that could be some rich learning, especially from a STEM perspective.
So I will say, so I'll bring it back from we're not looking to replace anything. This is to provide additional enrichment, additional learning experiences that they could not otherwise do in a standard classroom. So of course, the ultimate goal is we'd love to be able to send the students to Europe for a week and go look at all of these historical landmarks. But we know that feasibly that's impossible. So this helps provide an experience that they otherwise could not handle. And it provides a better experience than watching or reading on, again, let's say the Colosseum. They're actually there and they're actually able to walk around and see the dimensions and see the grandeur of something that reading or watching a video does not do it justice, because now things are at scale when you're there and you see this giant structure in front of you. Again, this is just from a history perspective. So this isn't looking to replace anything. This is an added benefit for students.
And isn't it true that this is going to be sort of housed in the LLC?
Correct.
So that, well, not that that's the only person that's going to be using it, but that's the person who's going to be tracking the use. And as Tina always says, feedback is a gift. I would imagine, because this is the pilot in 2 schools, that part of the signing them out or using them, would be to, at the end, ask students for feedback about how, with the little ones. How did you like it? What did you learn? This and that. I think that's also, like you said, a really important piece. We're not out to look to buy 2,000 of these. I think we pilot it in the 2 schools, gather some data, and see, how it goes, quite frankly.
Yeah, and then thinking ahead, right? If this pilot is a success, then we should be able to name some of the unique experiences that the VR learning can enhance the curriculum, like swimming with sharks. Like, we're never going to do that, but maybe we'll have an underwater experience now with the VR that we wouldn't be able to otherwise enhance the curriculum. And then it starts to name what those experiences are in the curriculum and then expand it out K-12, right? Because like Chad said, and Patty, right? If we can actually physically go to any of these experiences across the content areas in a field trip environment, we want to maintain that. But there are some experiences in the science or the social studies that we probably will never be able to do financially or liability wise, to be honest. And so how do we make those connections between cross content, right? Science and literacy and writing and research to enhance the curriculum? And then, like Chad said, do we expand it? How do we name it in the curriculum so that it becomes an assured experience for all kids? And then I think it's a great idea actually to talk about what Chad was saying about the, understanding what technology does, because there is a lot of research around in neuroscience around the brain and what the VR headsets do. Right. And how it shifts the brain and how it changes the brain when it's in these environments, which is fascinating. I don't know all that information, but how cool would that be, right? To even start doing some of that research at the secondary level, especially.
Well, that's actually kind of cool. But sorry, but the other thing is, I remember when I was in school, and this is really going to date me, but it was a really big to-do that they had just cloned a sheep. And Dolly, the sheep, had been cloned, and that was a big to-do. And now when you look at the high school science curriculum, it typically includes some sort of cell cloning. So I think to Dan's point, to Chad's point, and Peter's, of let's not only just utilize the technology, but let's look into how the technology is actually developed. That's actually something that, these students are going to be doing, or their kids are definitely going to be doing. So let's get that, if we can, to enhance our curriculum so that we can add something like that. So they're understanding how virtual reality is created and, you know, how to create virtual realities and how the technology itself works. I think that that would be a great added addition to our curriculum. So just my 2 cents.
Tina, jumping in here for a second, something you said made me think of another theme I've been trying to kind of bang the drum on since last spring, which is you're saying, you know, if we do this pilot and it's successful, and again, I don't want to make this too niche, it's just about VR. I'm more thinking of the sort of principle across the board. That's all the more reason that we need robust measurements for our district goals that are not just anchored solely to test scores, because I would argue that nothing about this program, if it's successful or not, is going to show up in any kind of a test score. So that's back to those sort of affirmative experiences, et cetera. And we need to have some idea about, is this program successful? Then again, as you're thinking about implementing it, Dan, this goes, I think, to some of the points you made. I would be skeptical about the travel experiences, and then also deeply excited and positive about the actual execution things, meaning being transported to this situation to learn this, to that. And the reason I say that is because I think for all these technology tools, we don't want them to be a novelty. We don't want them to sort of reinforce the party aspects of, you know, how they use their devices, their video games, their VR headsets at home. We want them to deepen the learning. So I think if you're bringing the level of rigor to it that it sounds like you are in terms of thinking about where we implement them, it could be a really a very positive thing. If it's kind of passive and we just paste it on and they just sort of sit there, then, you know, probably is a waste of money. Anyway, again, I'll stop talking now. It's enough for me.
And you hit the nail on the head. It has to be very engaging. It's not just going to be passive. I know we're using visits as one of our examples, but we always want the technology and really everything to be as engaging as possible, and we want the students to be engaging with the environment. And so and showing that, like the National Center for Biotechnology Information, all their studies with all the quotes that they include for all the kids who are on VR headsets is they have never felt more immersed before when they're doing a lesson in a VR headset. And I'm not saying that's going to be 100% of VR experiences, but the students, I mean, you know, Patty kind of touched on it. They're going to fight over it. The teachers are going to fight over it when they see the students are using it, not just because it's the shiny new toy, but because of what they're getting out of that experience.
Great. You touched on travel. I'm curious because when I was hearing Dan talk about the travel aspect of it, I was like, that's fantastic. I have a travel bug myself. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. This is going to be, kids are going to go in there. They're going to experience this and they're going to be like, that was really cool. I want to go there. I want to be there, which is, you know, the ultimate, right? I don't think that I don't think that the VR will replace their desire to travel to these various locations and see these things. That was my take on it. Was that what you were getting at, Chad?
Not quite so much. No, it's more just that to me, it doesn't sound like as robust a way to use it to learn as possible. Meaning, cool, they get to substitute seeing the Parthenon or something like that. But some of the other examples Dan said, I think, are much, much richer, and reinforcing that theme about how does that actual technology work, so that if one of our kids actually wants to get into the space of designing immersive experiences via technology, that there'd be an on-ramp for that too.
And from a designing and understanding and a programmatical experience, VR headsets do something in programming that they can't do anywhere else. That's 3D modeling. You can't it's very difficult to 3D model when you're using Scratch or Scratch Junior. But if you're in VR and you're programming in VR, now you're developing a 3D model that you can see and that you can virtually touch. And so these are things that we're now building on, understanding the back-end infrastructure of VR. Now you see, how do I create my own 3D model? And we have that ability to do that. So that's where, you know, you're in a program to build a program that will then build another program, believe it or not. It's very Inception, but it's the way it works. And that's where the kids they really ramp up and they really pick up a lot, because they're fully engaged and immersed in that experience. Anyone else?
Okay. I propose that we talk about sustainability, security, and then some of the components about the capital budget, and then the finances with the page 32. How does that sound? Okay. Okay, great. I wanted to highlight going back to our district initiatives, and one of them does have to do with sustainability, and you know, there had been talk about how can we put it as a separate program, and Phil and I talked about that. That's really challenging. But I did want to give you a sense, because it's kind of embedded in so many different areas, but I can give you a sense of where you find our sustainability efforts, if you will. If you're looking specifically at curriculum and instruction and co-curricular programs, and you look at the different stipends, for example, that are listed on page 127, you will see that we have green teams, and we have green teams at the middle school, high school, as well as the intermediate school. Those are student-led green teams. ProBut's a little bit different. It's kind of embedded in adult-led, but we are really proud of the work that our green team teachers have been doing as far as leading students. Talk about student-centric learning when you see students from the green team at the high school over helping the intermediate school kids plant bulbs and things like that. And it's been all over Instagram. We also have the hydroponic garden at the middle school, which is another, I would say another success story, if you will. If you look at the high school and you look at the course offerings under science, you will see that there is one section of AP environmental. There are 3 sections of environmental science, and then there are 2 sections for sustainable living, which is one of our popular courses, especially for upperclassmen. So that is the equivalent of approximately 1.2 full-time equivalencies of actual instruction during the day that's dedicated to the whole environmental science and sustainability initiatives, if you will. If you look at the capital budget, and Mike touched on this last night, there is money set aside for what we call the LED audit. That has to do with, I know, the lighting. I know, Peter, you have been a champion of that. So that appears in the capital budget. The other piece is people were asking about the composting and recycling. And I am very pleased that we have followed suit, as some of our Durgate members schools have, with regards to composting and recycling. And that is on page 179 in the budget, where you will see, there's rubbish removal, we recycle, and there's also funding for composting. Currently, we are composting, it's at the secondary level, correct? We are yet to start at the intermediate school. Is that right, Patty?
Yes, we haven't started that yet. We're supposed to start, I guess, in like February or March.
Okay.
And the high schoolers are going to come and help us.
Exactly. So this, again, is a really student-led program. We have the high schoolers under the direction of the sustainable living teacher, Mr. Aikenhead, work and go to the different buildings to empower the students at the other levels. I know there was a lot of work between the high school and the middle school to get that program up and running. Is that correct, Dan and Megan?
Yes, the students came just before the holiday break, spoke to all of our lunch waves, and stayed there with them to actually monitor a little bit how they're getting rid of their waste, whether it's the compost, whether it's the bottles and cans that can be recycled, or the landfill garbage. So yeah, it's been a success, and that's paired with a student initiative here at the middle school who's seeking to reduce plastic as part of a master project for Project Challenge, selling stainless steel utensils to reduce the plastic utensils in the cafeteria.
The best success we've had with this, quite frankly, is to let the students lead it, to be perfectly frank, because you can say, all right, we're going to do this. But, the adults telling the students, I've been doing this a long time. It's got to be a grassroots effort from the students, and to see them and to see the bins and to see what they're doing, it's really inspiring. When we look ahead, some of the things, the challenges that we're going to have ahead in the next several years. And I'm not sure how we are going to address it. However, there is, when you talk about the unfunded mandates, there is a law that by 2030, all of the school buses need to be electric. So we're gonna have to figure that out. How we do that and all of that, that's for future planning with the town. But I did want to mention that. So that's kind of where sustainability has been interwoven, if you will, into our curriculum. I don't know if there's any other questions specifically regarding sustainability that the team can answer.
I guess I'll just comment. First, I think it's overdue, but very timely to have that as a district goal and for it to take prominence among the other important goals we've talked about. Yeah, the LED lighting and other energy saving initiatives are at their sort of first steps, right? It's a little premature with some of the work that we want to do on looking at other initiatives, but that will fall under the rubric of sustainability moving forward. So I wasn't able to bring in those resources in time for these meetings, the UConn professor, et cetera. But I'll just put a space holder going. I think we have more to discuss about this. It may not make it into the budget this year, but certainly I like to remain focused on that moving forward. And then my other comment is going back to lead the way. You know, I'm a digital electronics guy back when in Silicon Valley, so I sort of weigh that. But then I see in Lead the Way, there's environmental sustainability as one of the options. I was like, wow, that would really work well with our sustainability initiatives. But then hearing the coursework, I think we probably have it covered, right? Like, which is pretty good. But one may envision that part of digital electronics is figuring out how to charge and power our future buses and Teslas in the parking lot. So we may get some mileage out of it. The other comment I was going to make is because it feeds into some of the like VR use and some of the other academic initiatives. I mean, this is sort of like our sort of R&D budget, right? I mean, I'm speaking like a Silicon Valley executive, right? I have an R&D budget. So R&D on virtual reality, R&D on composting and letting the kids literally get their hands dirty, right? So there could be other envisioned R&D projects ahead of us to feed into the sustainability. I mean, one may just be like Chad and I talk about, like better materials, things that are healthier for the kids and the air quality. Another could be expanding the garden and the hydroponics and maybe even planting greenery on the roofs because that cools the buildings, right, at no expense. So we've opened up not a Pandora's box, but I think a very positive instructional box with sustainability. So that was my pitch for why I take such an interest in this. And I think the funding mechanism is probably fine moving forward, but I would keep the door open that we may come up with some late breaking, clever projects that may need some stipends before we close this out in April. So I'm just asking my fellow board members to be receptive to that if possible. Okay, that's my pitch. And thank you for including that in today's discussion.
Can I just ask one more question? In addition to what we're doing with the students on sustainability, what about the food service provider, Chartwells? Are they engaged in this as well?
I think that they're engaged from the point of view of the healthy eating. You know, years ago, to be frank, when we started our garden at the high school, that was donated, so the organic garden, we were growing things, and then at the beginning of the school year, you know, when the lettuce and all that, they were featuring some of the vegetables and things in the cafeteria, like lettuce from our garden. Unfortunately, the amount of students and the quantity didn't really catch up, but I think that we need to revisit and begin that conversation again. I think it also can fall under the wellness policy that I know that that's one of the policies that Sharon and I talked about with the subcommittee about revisiting with Tracy Edwards' help. And so I think you're right in short, that that's another avenue by which we could explore.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure. So moving from the sustainability, I believe that I said capital budget, is that correct? If we wanted to,
Yep.
oh no, security, oh, sorry. Still a little bit fuzzy here with my bronchitis. So before I turn it over to Joe Rios, I just want to point out a few things of where security is in the budget, if you're not sure. If you would like to look at where the salary line is in security, that is on page 153. Those are the security specialists minus Mr. Rios' salary. So you have the salaries for the security specialists. You have also, and Phil, help me out, there is funding put aside for the mile of safety officer within the budget. Where is that, Phil, specifically? Is it contracted services?
It is in contract services, object code 3308.
3308. So you see a piece of it there in the 3308. We also provide the school resource officer with professional development, correct, Phil?
Also correct.
And that's a piece that we pay for. And now looking at some of the specifics of what we've done and what we plan to do. Mr. Del Mastro spoke last night that there is in the capital budget, I believe it's $330,000 line for district-wide security initiatives. That's for next year. Currently this year, just with the salaries and the mile of safety and all of that, we're probably, this year's budget is probably about $500,000. Wouldn't you say, Phil, that has been dedicated to security?
Correct.
And then we also had a special appropriation from the town. So probably brings us up closer to about $750,000. Of course, it's not always about money. It's about obviously the safety and well-being of our children. So Mr. Rios, maybe you could give us a quick overview about the team. I know a new person started today, right? Our floater started today, and now our team is full again, correct?
Yes, I was very pleased to bring our two new security guards on board. First of all, I'd like to say good morning or good afternoon. Happy Friday to everyone on the board and who's on the call. Yes, I am very pleased. We do have a very strong security team in Weston. We're very fortunate, and we just hired two new security specialists at the high school. We started on Tuesday, and this morning as our floater, we had our second guard start, Jim Potenziani. So we expect good things from them, great things from them. I know they care about children. I know they care about education, and they're going to work hard every day to support our mission in keeping everyone safe in our schools. I'd like to give a brief overview, again, respecting that some of the security matters should probably be discussed in executive session for all the appropriate reasons, but looking at some of the things that we're looking to accomplish when it comes to the capital budget, we're looking at window film, we're looking at ballistic glass, also considering cameras. There are new cameras in this day and age with AI technology that we can be very specific on our searches. That will be, cut down a lot of investigative time if necessary. We are also looking at fencing. As you know, we have an open campus. We have sidewalks that come through our campus that are open to the public. So that does present a challenge to us at times during the school day when security guards or staff, mostly I believe it's security guards that have to go out and, ask individuals not to be on school grounds during the school day. We also are going to continue with our door repairs, our door replacement across the district. Again, that is an initiative that was started long before I got here. So that's an overview of what we're looking at from an initiative standpoint. Again, this is a collaborative effort, and we continue to benefit every day with the support of the Weston Police Department, who are great partners. So this effort, when it comes to school hardening and training of our personnel, also including additional training for security, this is in conjunction and collaboration with operations, with Phil Cross, with Mike Del Mastro, with Lisa and the central office team, with school principals, all the way down to the security team that are in place throughout the district. So this is a team effort. This is something that, while we may not disclose everything that we are doing, we are working very hard day to day behind the scenes to maintain a high level of security and standardizing our processes and our systems across the entire district, including all our schools and central office.
Thank you. There's a couple things I just want to add. Joe, I understand that in August or July, August, you and Captain Brodacki did an audit or assessment, if you will, of the campus. And I know we talked about it before, but I think it's worth highlighting again.
Yeah, so Captain Brodacki and I did do an assessment looking at the interior and the exterior of the schools, focusing on what are some of our threats, vulnerabilities, what areas from a crime prevention standpoint, can we work throughout the district, again, to resolve, and again, supporting the academic and educational environment. Some things from a security standpoint, there's a balance that we want to do it aesthetically, but we also want it to fit into the needs here in Weston. So that is something that, Matt and I have talked about, Phil and I have talked about, and also with Lisa. So that's part of our plan going forward. Some of our security measures will, looking at our options and our evaluation and costs, some of it may have to be phased in. So that approach may take, 1, 2, or 3 years. I think from an overview standpoint, we're still looking at that and prioritizing what are the best needs for Weston right now.
And one thing I want to emphasize, I mean, I've known Matt Brodacki for years. I have a close relationship with both him and Chief Hennion, but Captain Brodacki is a little bit modest. And when we say that he has done an assessment or a security audit, I think it is worthwhile to understand a little bit about Captain Brodacki's background. Captain Brodacki, there was a new course that was ordered by Congress, and I want to read it because I don't want to misspeak. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, he attended the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center back in December 22. He actually graduated from that. And he is in one of the first cohorts in this state that is certified under the Secret Service. So when we say that he did an audit, he did an assessment, he's top notch at the national level, quite frankly. Between that and his area of technological expertise, and quite frankly, the reason that we have the crime lab here because of him and the work and the support of Chief Hennion, it is worth mentioning because he really is at the forefront of all of the training. And we are so fortunate that here in quite frankly, our little town of Weston, that we have a captain of the qualifications of Matt Brodacki, and that he has this training at the national level and to be certified by the Secret Service. So when we say that we defer to him and work collaboratively with him and Chief Hennion about what we need and what their opinions are, I have the utmost regard and respect for his level of expertise, as well as Chief Hennion's, and as well as you, Joe. I mean, you're modest, but you were there at Sandy Hook. You have a very strong background in security and safety and police enforcement. So I have to say that I feel like we are in very good hands with our initiatives moving forward. Any questions?
Hey guys, quick questions from me. Thanks for that, Joe. Look, I really appreciate it. This has been an ongoing conversation, as everyone knows. And something I think that's, of course, important for me, along with other things, and for parents. And so I appreciate the disclosure, Joe, as to what's going on, what you guys are being attentive to. And Lisa, I appreciate, of course, your partnership on this too. I know you're super concerned about it. I know you're working through it. These things take time. I just want to make sure we're on pace, of course, to address those things that we all think we need, to address in the near future. I think that's why it's important. Look, we had this discussion before the break that we were going to have a special session. Steve, I still think we should get one on the calendar soon, just to sort of talk through this. I don't want to take up a ton of time today. We've been on the call for a while. Just a couple quick questions really quickly. Joe, sounds like we're back to full staff, I guess, with the
That's correct.
hiring of the recent security specialists and the floater. Do we plan on communicating this, Lisa, at all to the community, to parents, just to look? It's been a big concern, and I think it would make people feel somewhat at ease to know that we've made progress here, and that of course these additional security specialists have been hired. So I don't know if you can answer that right now for me, Lisa.
I believe communications went out or will be going out from the schools. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have one new one at the high school, and then we have the floater. Wasn't that mentioned in one of your updates, Megan? I'm trying to remember. I think so. Or he actually just started, so isn't it?
He just started, so he'll be in this Sundays. We just introduced him to staff, and that'll be in the Sundays week ahead.
But I do, it's a good point that Michael just made. You should do this, Lisa, in your district-wide, or we should have a district-wide announcement of this. That we've increased. This is an important topic to the community and to this board, so we should include it in whatever the form of communication you think best to get it out to the whole constituency, not just individual schools.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand or kind of a multi-pronged approach at both levels, because we're going to have the principals, that includes Patty and Laura, because the other gentleman just started today, send something out for this weekend for their weekly update, introducing them. And what I'm hearing you say, Steve, is we do an update at the end of January, but you think it would be who of us to send something out ahead of time at the district level. We can certainly do that today.
Yeah, I just think it would be good.
Or you know what, I'll send it out Monday and let the principals get out there, and then we'll send the other one out Monday morning for the other schools. How does that sound?
Yeah. That's a good thing. Thanks for that,
Get
Michael.
working on that with the photos of the gentlemen, because that's the other thing, just so you know, we always send the photos out to our staff and everybody, because we want to make sure, like, who are these people, So yeah, we will make sure. Thank you. Good suggestion.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, during the course of our meeting, I believe, Laura, your staff sent out an email about Jim Potenziani.
Yes, I
I
introduced him to the staff today. The family email will be going out at the beginning of the week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look, I just think that it'll prevent a lot of angst and emails, obviously, to the board. And look, it gives us credit where credit is due, to the extent that, of course, we are trying to, rectify some volatility sort of in that staffing that people saw and were upset about. Okay, great. First thing. Second thing, the details around the capital budget at $330,000. Joe, if I heard you correctly, that's inclusive of sort of all these window films, ballistic glass, updated cameras. Is that all in that 330, or did I misunderstand? And these are just things that we're considering going forward, but are not part of that amount.
That's a good question, Michael. And with this being my first budget cycle, I believe part of that money is there, but I'd like to defer to Phil, if he could jump in and help us out with that.
I think we're going to have a deeper discussion in an executive session, probably just to go about the details of that. We're working on a multi-year plan as it relates to all the security initiatives. So in short order, we'll have those discussions, and we'll provide additional details to the board.
Thanks, Phil.
Great. And look, I obviously want to partner with everyone here. I want to move forward with this reasonably, of course. And Joe and Lisa, I've had discussions with you both about, hey, look, what is the wish list here? What are the priorities that we should be considering, and sort of what are the estimated costs? And let's go through that. So maybe we can cover that as well in executive session, in terms of, how can we best help you guys, of course, with the security situation here, and of course, put the community's mind at ease when it comes to security of their children. So I look forward to doing that. And then the last quick question, and then we can again discuss this later on during a special session, is just to be clear, the SROs, for example, those are not part of the BOE budget, correct? Those are part of the town budget. If again, this is my first time going through this as well, but I just want to be clear that all of the security that, of course, is part of the schools here, frankly, the cost is not all included here, right? The cost to Weston's community is greater, right, than what we're showing in the BOE here, in the BOE budget, because of, let's say, SRO costs not being included here. Is that correct?
Yes. The
Okay.
2 SROs are in the police budget, as well as when we look at the mile of safety. Phil,
Yeah.
what's the split? I think we do 60%
60,
and the
60-40.
60-40, right, Steve?
Okay.
So yes, when I say, oh, we spent about $750,000 this year, the town also, or the police, that in the cost of the 2 SROs and 40% of the mile of safety is on the town.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So let's see where we are, making sure that we're catching everything on the list. I know that, did we answer the question, David, that you had about the surplus last year? I know that, Phil, started with that. And I know that there was some talk about it at the board and the finance meetings when you say, like, we have a certain budget and then all of a sudden, my computer.
Uh-oh, Dan.
My computer is phasing out. Get me those switches, man. Come on. I know that, like, for example, transportation, we got $100,000 credit from transportation. I'm just remembering. We had extra revenue that we didn't anticipate from tuition, for example. We have the cost savings with positions. Some positions weren't filled. Somebody might leave. We have a month or two that we don't have to pay the salary. A lot of that added up into the surplus. And, to the point of how do we plan better? Sometimes those things you can't plan for. I mean, I'm just happy that I don't want to be going to the town all of the time asking for money if we cut it too close. Phil, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that of our unexpected revenue?
Not necessarily for this meeting. What we can do just to have information, we can provide, I know Michael has not been, just recently joined the board. We can share the previous year's report just to provide more context, because we did detail all of the savings in those past reports. And then maybe in a follow-up meeting, we can have all the discussions if there's any questions still remaining in terms of what were the drivers for the surplus. But to Lisa's point, and I think we always stress this, right? We never over budget. If you look at our budget historically, it's been pretty lean. And again, so I know, a lot of the items that we have beginning in fiscal year 20 has been driven by COVID. I think this is probably the first year where we can say that we are sort of kind of having a normal year. But a lot of the items that we have are really lingering or residual effects because of COVID. A lot of it has to do with staff, and a lot of the savings that we have in previous years had to do with tuition, transportation, and the like. So again, I think just having the context and just looking at those reports probably will help. And we can have the conversations after that.
Yeah, and for my purposes, since the question was originally directed to me, I think it would be helpful at our next meeting to have an actual number of where we're trending as of now and where Phil sees us at the end of the year. Because again, I understand, Phil, what you're saying. You don't over budget. I'm not suggesting that you do over budget. My concern is, and it has been year over year, the minimum budget requirement. So I think we have to just, yeah. So if for the next meeting, if you could come with the two numbers of, where we are at that moment. I know also at the regular Board of Ed meetings, you basically have where we're at the moment, but perhaps more specifically, where do you see us come June?
So I think the norm, what we'll do, I'm not quite sure, I don't remember when our next meeting is. We do have a scheduled subcommittee meeting next Friday. So we'll have the subcommittee on Friday, and then the following Monday, I think after MLK Day, we'll report out to the full board. That's our normal cadence, unless you want to change that, David.
No, okay, so right, so but I think for the purposes of the budget cycle, for people who are choosing to tune into just this part of the work that we do, I think it would be helpful, or we can just repeat it at the next time we meet. But yeah, I understand that at the next regular Board of Ed meeting, you'll let us know where we are at that moment. Will you also have the ability to tell us where you see us being in June?
Yeah, which it's a part of the report. It'll be a part of the report. I mean, as of November, we were looking at a surplus of $238,000. I mean, we have had several items that have occurred since then. You know, we had a fiber issue, which may or may not be significant. We've had several breakdown in equipment and the like. So I can tell you where we are. It's not going to be set in stone. But again, it's whether it's this year or in previous years, there's a reason as to whether or not there's a surplus or a deficit. So the reports will help, and we'll definitely provide a report in terms of where we are.
Okay, and then related to this year's budget, since we used some of the surplus last year to pre-purchase, how does that affect this year's budget? Was it because if I recall correctly, at the very last minute, the items that we prepaid then got removed from this year's budget, right?
Correct. So last year we pre-purchased the first phase of the Reading Initiative.
Okay, so this year's budget we're operating with right now, essentially the final budget was offset or reduced by some of the surplus from the previous year that we pre-purchased.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. So, according to our calendar, it says on the calendar that any other Board of Education questions we would ask to be submitted to the superintendent by end of day Monday. So what I would respectfully ask is, if you have a question, if you could email me and CC your fellow board members, but write in the subject line, for informational purposes only. We can't get into a discussion via email, but then people can see what other people are asking. If there's anything that you need, you know, I'd like more detail on this. I'd like more detail on that. And we will work as we did last time to have those answers for you. I would really like to have those answers for you next Thursday at the Board of Ed workshop. We will do our very best to answer as many as we can. So that's for Monday, the questions. On Wednesday, the 10th, we have public forum number 1. That is remote, I believe. And that's an open forum for parents in the community to share comments and ask questions regarding the requested budget. That will be at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, correct? Okay. Then Thursday, we have our second workshop. That will also be remote again. On that next Friday, there's the Board of Finance Committee meeting, which Phil just spoke about. On the 16th, we have our board monthly meeting, and that is an in-person meeting. It's great that it's going to be in person. We're going to honor our Teacher of the Year, who will be there and be very happy, and is already planning on inviting, I think, our extended family. So that will be in the middle school. That's a regular Board of Ed monthly meeting. And then we go into forum number 2 on the 18th of January. Then we have another budget workshop if we need it on the 22nd. And then the big date is Tuesday, the 23rd of January, hopefully when we have the approval and adoption of the budget. And if we need more time, then we go to the following Thursday. So basically, we need to transmit our budget on Friday, the 26th of January, kind of giving us an overview. So Does anyone have any questions on that timetable or, you know, anything that we can clarify, help you with? Please let us know. I'll take that as we're good to go. Okay. And again, as always, if somebody has a particular question that they, you know, especially like you, Mike, you're new to the setup or whatever, please feel free to call, because it is part of it is getting used to the way the budget is presented in the book and the lines and everything else. So please feel free to call me. You'll have my number, and I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you as well. And to make sure that it's very important to us that you feel comfortable with it, that you understand that what we're asking, we know that it's a big ask. I mean, you know, unlike other Durgate communities, except maybe Easton Reading, it's on the backs of the Weston taxpayers, and we're very conscious of that. So we're here to listen to your feedback, answer any questions and suggestions that you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Is there anything else or any other topics the board would like to discuss? Great. Well, thanks, Lisa.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, when are we going to do the capital budget part of the piece?
I'm sorry. That was on
you
the
want to
list.
do nuts and bolts now, or are we just nut and bolted out of, you know, we're just.
I mean, we're available if you want to go through it for 15, 20 minutes.
Is Mike here, or does Phil want to go through it? But or we can wait to Thursday when we're fresh.
Or do you want us to have Mike there for Thursday? What's most helpful for you?
Oh, I think Mike should present it, and we should, because he may find new information between now and then, right?
Okay.
That's where he left it with us. But I think that should be maybe our first topic.
Sure. Phil, can you make
discuss.
sure that Mike is on board for that?
Yeah, he was trying to log on, but so I think let's wait for Thursday.
Okay.
Because to Peter's point, we were still waiting on additional information.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing up Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
Just one other thing for our listening audience. The snow is coming over the weekend, so we think we'll be good on Monday to open school. Just putting that out there, because I already have little children saying, are we going to have a snow day? I don't think so. Thank you.
Sounds like a song from Frozen.
You know, last year I made a mistake of promising the kindergartners they'd have one snow day. And let me tell you, I was a nervous wreck until we got that one snow day. This year I've learned, Miss Cadis, I'm not saying anything, they hold me to it. So we shall see. Thank you.
We'll hold you to that. If there isn't anything else, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?